Your desk.
Want to be annexed, and there's no want to be annexed, and they're not in it. Tennessee, be like got New York side, they want to be in the city. I bet you say
No, it goes by lot, doesn't go by section. Lot by lot.
I love it. My first husband and I, we lived there on purpose. Like it was our dream. But then he got really, he got like
Current future land use map, so it's a place-based map, it's not a zoning map.
fatally ill.
And it just shows you the yellow is residential, red shaded are commercial, purple are industrial.
Just listen.
draft.
Just listen. That's all we do.
The urban grid boundaries, but as you can see, they were removed.
See that guy up there?
Yeah.
Look at that guy looking along.
Yeah, people get seasonal vintage disorder, yeah. Yeah, I got it too.
No, and this is the red, this is the red line. It's really not, you could have original on top, it's just outside the city limits.
That guy's got a gun.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
Huh?
Denali.
Well, scary, yeah, they go. She's got a camera permit.
Yeah.
There's no reason.
Yeah, winter time, summer it's beautiful there. Just, it's amazing. It's a beautiful state. It's amazing. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, it's 1 o'clock, let's.
Yeah, there's some, there's yeah. Well, there's probably
Yeah, yeah.
all the large development. And so there's a large land here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful area.
I'd like to go.
Oh, is that right? Well, yeah.
Yeah, no.
So now somebody can come in and say, okay,
My brain cruises. Yeah. Yeah, I would take a cruise because then it's like a big stop, bop, 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 and stop.
So that's, right now, marbles and a lot of.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, a lot of people in Alaska, they vacation in Hawaii. This is right, they just fly down, or they take their ships out.
There's no application.
Like where people here go to Panama City for vacation, even Alaska go to Hawaii for vacation. Me neither. I'd rather go to Tampa. Yeah, me too. Yeah, that's why we're ready to get out of Tampa. We get our sheets. We hadn't been to like 10 years. Yeah.
So this.
Yeah. With visitors. Yeah, us too. Yeah, us too.
So you have to go in. So, well, people, I needed to go about 2% a year. You look at the plan, so it's year over year, it's not much good. You had a little bit of growth in 2020, consensus of 9%.
Yeah.
2%. So short.
Hey, Bill. We know Bill. Yeah. I never get you to come. Never could get you to come.
No, that's right. I'm too dumb.
Well, I don't know anything either, but he sure does.
Yeah. Smart enough for the both of us.
So you don't need to
So
go.
I don't need to.
He's plays with us.
Huh?
They're back here by.
Good afternoon to everyone.
Mr. Mayor.
So,
That's the mayor.
welcome to our first town hall meeting. Kick off our opportunity to answer questions that you have about our comprehensive development plan. This afternoon we'll have our planning director, Ms. Mary San Diego, is here, who's as familiar with this document as anyone in Tullahoma. Next in order of familiarity is probably Winston Brooks, who started this as our community coordinator, and he's certainly totally familiar with it. And our city administrator, Ms. Jennifer Moody. I'm here to listen. So, but thank you for coming to take an interest in what we're doing. This is your plan, and we want to get as much of your input into this plan as we possibly can. So it's kind of a, there'll be other people kind of coming in during this time, I'm sure, and feel free to go anytime you want to, just so long as we get your questions answered before you need to leave. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Mary Samaniego, and Mary, you have any opening remarks?
No, I just appreciate everybody taking the time to come here and answer questions and provide additional input on the draft plan as we're moving forward. You can feel free to ask questions right now in front of everybody, and I'll write down the comments. Or you can just come directly and speak with myself, Ms. Moody, Winston, and just ask me questions just between the two of us, and I can write down your comments if you feel more comfortable that way. So, anybody have any questions or comments? Yes. What was your name, sir? I have to keep a record. Joe. Okay.
My wife and I live in some of the states.
Okay.
And it showed as a suburban flow with TNN optional.
Okay.
Our subdivision has a minimum of 5 acre lots.
Okay.
It's totally built out, and it seems like it should be designated as rural.
Okay, I will make that. So remove heritage estates permitted. It's my northern accent. Remove hermitage estates from TNN and replace it with rural residential. That, I believe, has a recommendation, just so you understand, I think rural residential has a minimum lot size recommendation of like a 2 acre lot. Does it? Let's see. It's 2 acres on the draft that the planning commission reviewed. 2 acre minimum lot size. Okay, any other comments? Okay, any questions?
I've got one.
Hold on, we're going one person by person.
Do what?
Sir, are you done? Okay, that's okay.
I'm sorry.
I just got to make sure I keep it obviously always down. Okay, what was your name?
Larry Shelton.
Larry
Shelton,
Shelton, okay. What's your address or neighborhood?
1407 Country Club Drive.
1406. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I've got a question about the plan to build behind the Terra
Okay,
in that area. And I don't know, I just noticed here the size of that. Looks like there's going to be several homes or places to live. And what's going to be done about the traffic? The extra traffic is going to be coming across that side of the already
when,
and how you going to control that many cars coming through there?
okay, so when a property was to come in and develop, they are required to submit a traffic study
Okay.
that shows where they're proposing their traffic to flow through. And then we can control what roads they put traffic on through the subdivision and planned unit development approval process. So we can make sure that too much traffic isn't going on a road that can't handle that much traffic. We can also control the density to the project as well. So if it's on a road that can't handle more than 100 additional trips a day and they're wanting to put 1,000 on there, that would be a reason to justify recommending denial of that project because we don't have the infrastructure to support that much growth.
I just know how much traffic's on there now since we lived there now for about 20 years. We've noticed that the increase in traffic is pretty high now at certain times of the day. And there's nothing there to kind of slow that traffic down. And with the increase of vehicles on that, I can see that being.
Yeah, and now, do you understand that certain roads are designed to handle more traffic than others? So we have local roads that are supposed to be kind of neighborhood, suburban, low traffic. And then there are main roads like Country Club, Short Springs, Jackson, Carroll, that are supposed to handle more traffic, obviously, than the local roads.
Right now, I'm basically talking about the volume of vehicles.
Yeah, and we do,
Control of that they speed through there now, I don't see people coming through there all the time. You'll have to stop it somewhere
Yeah.
to slow the traffic down.
And we do, in coordination with the Tennessee Department of Transportation, we do traffic counts annually on all our main roads so we can monitor how much traffic is occurring on these roads, so we can monitor how much additional capacity we have to regulate additional.
And they will probably go back and look at, like in this certain section here, that has another outlet besides just two of them there on the,
Right,
what the manor, whatever the name of
Make it matter, yeah, the city subdivision regulations as they're currently written require neighborhoods, new neighborhoods to connect into each other. So we don't have large neighborhoods with only one way in and one way out anymore.
Okay.
Besides more adequate delivery of services for police, fire,
Right.
garbage collection, snow removal, also it helps disperse the traffic. So right now you'll see on Country Club in Short Springs, Macon Manor, Terrace Estates, Plantwood, all the subdivisions, there's only one way in and one way out. So the only way to get anywhere is everybody's got to go on a short street, as opposed to if they were interconnected and then connected to other main roads, that the traffic would be dispersed.
Is some of the traffic going to be let out on Lincoln from this neighborhood?
From which neighborhood?
The one that Anderson Farm, I
The one-
guess?
Yeah, I mean, again, we don't have a proposal for that right now, but yes, they have a direct, there's a city road named Jerry Street that leads directly into that property, and it goes right into Grundy, and it continues right onto Lincoln, and then Lincoln is an original arterial. So that would be the main way in and
So
way
you
out.
got like 3 of these.
Yeah, right now, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 rights of way that connect into that property, existing rights of way.
I see some options there. I was just curious about.
Of course.
2 corner Garden Lake roads
Of course.
as another route.
There's certainly one way in, one way out.
Any other comments that you had? So how to handle traffic for development? In connections above, okay. Do you have any specific recommendations for revisions to the plan? Any recommendations to revisions to the text of the
Other
plan
than-
or the map?
Then it being 400 homes stuck in there, I'd like to see a subdivision that has less homes built in one area.
Okay.
I don't, you know,
I don't.
I'm hearing stories of 400 and 500 homes stuck in this one area, and I don't know. I don't think that's, and I understand that Tullahoma needs more housing, but to stick a bunch of homes on one spot and then be cookie cutter homes, I don't think that's the image that Tullahoma wants. That's my
See
opinion.
the appreciate that appraisal of my property.
They go down,
They
to
go,
see.
I don't want to go.
Take this
Right.
right in.
Okay,
It's a nice area.
yeah,
Right here.
okay. Who's next? Anybody else have any comments, questions at this time? Ma'am in the back?
Yes.
What's your name?
Kim Nelson.
Kim Nelson? Okay,
I just have-
address or subdivision?
None. I have a question because you have remove all rural residential from entire UGB. I don't know what UGB means.
UGB is, within the plan, that is the urban growth boundary, so those are areas that are in the county's jurisdiction. They're not in the city limits of Tullahoma. However, back in the 90s, state statute required that cities can have a growth area that go out into the county. So right now, we have an urban growth boundary agreement with Franklin County to the south and an urban growth boundary with Coffee County to the north. So those are areas that the property owners in those areas can request to be annexed by the city. If they're annexed, we would determine what the appropriate place type is on a case-by-case basis, depending on the character of the site and that surrounding area.
So can they also be requested to not be annexed by the city?
The city does not have the legal authority to annex anybody against their will. The state statute said property owners can request to be annexed.
Okay, so right now those green spots are just, they're
They're county property.
Got it. Thank
If
you.
somebody in there wants to be part of the city limits, they request the city to annex it.
Okay, thank you.
So Mary, if I could interrupt, since we have so many people and it's very hard to hear at this end what's happening at this end, if I could invite some of you, Winston and I are gonna head into this other room and we'll start taking some questions in there. And that'll help everybody get their questions answered a little bit faster, and I think you'll be able to hear better. So are there some that want to join us in the other room?
Do you have these resources in the other room?
We do, we brought some.
Yeah. Go in the other room. Smaller group.
Any, who's next? Comments, questions? At this table? Do you have any comments?
Just right down here to your left.
Recommendations?
Is another room.
Dallas, it's a comment of a question. I live on Swift Lane, which is off of
I am, how are you?
now, the attraction.
Oh, are you really?
I think I'll ask a question and answer for 3 hours. I don't think so.
Swift Lane is a very
Okay, I'm gonna go there. Okay, I'll get that.
So there is almost no traffic.
Right,
I like it this way.
okay.
And it's like, I've always wondered, should the city want to do this, they can connect Swift Lane into Iris Circle. And then make it a 3 street,
Into Charlotte Circle?
Charlotte Circle.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
At which time I would pull up stakes and leave.
Okay, I don't think that they're,
I don't
I'm sorry.
think it's gonna happen, but that's always been a fear of mine.
Yeah.
It's a quiet little neighborhood. Most folks wouldn't think much of my place, but I like where I'm at.
well, it's your home.
Pardon?
It's your home, yeah.
It is that, and like-
Yeah.
But again, it is a very quiet neighborhood. And it's like, so, it's stuff like that where that's, and I've lived there 46, 47 years,
Uh-huh.
and I
You wanna
I would
sit-
like to stay there. so.
Yeah. Well, what the plan says for that area is, it's low, suburban neighborhood low, which is low density residential. That's what it's been for decades, and will continue to be that. I can see by looking at this map, at the end of Swift Lane and Charlotte Circle, that's all floodplain right through there. So the likely, and this isn't an area where we're
I
promoting any
realize
growth.
it's unlikely,
Yeah,
but I've seen unlikely things happen before. I've been in the construction industry for over 50 years.
yeah,
So it's like I've had to go through these
Right.
swamps and build roads.
yeah.
It
I-
can be done.
Yes, I'll say that there's nothing in this 20-year plan that is suggesting any road construction on that street.
Well, in 20 years, I probably won't be around anyway. so-
Well,
We will always pray. We always-
what was your name, sir?
My name is Dole Reeves.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns?
Not at this time.
Okay. No road connection through Swift Lane. Bear with me. Okay, who wants to go next? And again, you don't, if anybody has questions, comments, you don't have to voice it in front of everybody, you can just see me privately.
Mary, a question on that following that.
Uh-huh.
Is there something that TDEC has done to prohibit development in floodplains and especially wetlands? And I don't know if any of those areas in that area
Yeah.
are considered wetlands or not. There should be some environmental restrictions in place.
There are, if it is a, so there's two different issues. There's floodplain and then there's TDEC, kind of waters of the state. So with TDEC, if it's a Blue Line Creek or a wetland, if it has less than a mile drainage area, then it's required to have a 30-foot riparian buffer, it's what it's called, from the shore, the banks or the topmost elevation of that wetland. those riparian buffers have to be left in their natural state. You can't touch them. If the drainage area is more than a mile, then it's a 60-foot buffer. So if it's a major creek, river, there's a 60-foot buffer that has to be maintained before any development can happen. Then the other part of that is there is FEMA floodplain. The floodplain is made up of, the entire floodplain is made up of the floodway and the floodway fringe. You can't really develop any vertical structures in the floodway. In the floodway fringe, you can develop, but you have to have the lowest floor of your building a foot above the flood elevation. So it's still, through FEMA, possible to develop in the floodway fringe.
Question on that,
Yeah.
Blue Line Creek. I've heard this many times, I've had it explained to me
Yeah.
that a blue line on the map doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's just a place for water to run. And I got that from an attorney who dealt with these things.
Yeah.
All right, my question is this. What you just stated, does that also apply to wet weather conveyances?
Sometimes. That's the answer, sometimes.
That's,
It depends.
if it comes from TDEC, I can expect this.
Yeah, it's sometimes,
We'll just have to
it
see.
depends on the drainage area of that wet weather conveyance. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's
This
an
has a-
intermittent stream.
This has a huge area draining to it.
Mhm.
So when we get a hard rain,
Yeah,
this thing swells
Is this
to
Jackson? Is this the?
yeah.
almost out of the banks.
I'm trying to
So what,
figure this
so what occurs is that if it's not
So this is
a mapped,
Okay.
blue line stream or creek, it's an unstudied area that is called a wet weather conveyance, then we require the developer or whoever's proposing a project to do a hydrology study that studies the drainage area of that dry creek or wet weather creek and determine then the impacts of it to then be classified. Meaning most wet weather conveyances around here haven't been studied, so we require them to be studied on an individual basis when a development project is
This
proposed.
sounds like dealing with wetlands also. It's like
Exactly. Most
somebody says
wetlands,
it's wetland, and now you've got to do
You just come upon it.
hydrology and, you know, I'm
That's why
going
we-
through one of them right now.
yeah, that's why before we do any project, when we get an application for a site plan or a subdivision or whatever, myself and the city engineer and public works director go out and walk the site to do visual observations of the site to see if there are wetlands, environmentally sensitive issues, tree preservation, that kind of thing,
Can you
to do an
tell from-
inventory of the site.
Can you tell from just a walkthrough?
Well, we do a walkthrough, and then you can also look at the soils maps, the type of vegetation that's growing as well.
But, okay.
I'd like to add to that because we've got what's called a wet weather creek that runs down through here and it drains a pretty big area and eventually comes out into.
Yeah, you can see it, it goes through here, it goes through here. I can't remember the name of it, but yeah.
And it shows on the topo maps, but it doesn't show on here.
Yeah,
And people have come close to drowning trying to cross it after heavy rains.
yeah, yeah. Sir, yes, what was your name?
John?
Okay. And what's your
Sorry,
address?
I wasn't here right at 1 o'clock.
We're just fielding questions, comments, concerns
Okay.
about revisions to the plan or any questions on the plan. What was your neighborhood or address, sir?
My address is 95 Blue Sky Court.
Okay, and what were your comments?
Well, the question that I have is the purpose of this to get inputs for this? Or is the purpose of this meeting to also try to understand why we're doing this? And the basis for my question is, in the year 2020, did we do a 2020 plan in Tullahoma 20 years ago?
Okay, so your first answer is that the purpose of this meeting, it was requested from members of the public to have additional input on the draft plan.
Okay.
So that is what we're doing here today. You can ask questions to make sure everybody understands what's in the draft plan, as well as have comments of changes that individual citizens are recommending to make to the planning commission and board.
Okay.
The last comprehensive plan that we had was completed in 2012.
When was it started though?
2011. So they started the process in 2011,
No,
and then they adopted it in 2012.
I'm not sure if I conveyed my
Okay.
question correctly.
Okay.
This is basically, for all purposes, I'll just say 2020. And you're looking 20 years from now,
Right.
Plan 2040.
Right.
My question was there a comprehensive plan in the year 2000
Yes.
to look at 2020?
Yes, the very first comprehensive plan in the city of Tullahoma, I believe, was adopted in 1966.
Okay,
And there has been a comprehensive plan in the city of Tullahoma that this entire time.
okay,
Different versions that's
Okay, so-
always being updated every 10, 15-year increment.
okay, so my question then is, in the year 2000, and now we're past 2020, how many of the objectives in 2000 did we meet for 2020?
I can't answer that right now.
Well, who would know that?
I would have to do research.
Well, the reason I'm asking that question is, if we had a plan in the year 2000 that said this is where we want to be in 2020, and now it's 2020 and we're looking at 2040, if we only met 30% of what we wanted to do in 2020, why are we looking at 2040 rather than completing the requirements or completing the objectives that you had in the year 2000? That's my question. So why would you go and look at 2040 if you haven't met at least 50 to 75% of your desired requirements in the year 2000?
Hold on, I'm trying to write your comments down. I think I'm answering your question.
Okay.
I think I'm about to answer your question.
Okay,
When I began this job a year and a half ago, I reviewed all of the previous comprehensive plans.
okay,
The consultants reviewed the last, I think, 2 rounds of comprehensive plans that the city had.
okay,
A lot of the goals and objectives in those plans have never been implemented.
okay,
And then we surveyed the public and saying, okay, with this current plan, what would you like to see? A lot of those same issues that were in the 1960s plan, the 1980s plan, kept coming up.
okay,
The desire, as an example,
okay,
a desire to improve the traffic on Cedar Lane has been in a version of the comprehensive plan of the city for 50 years.
right,
So it's in this plan.
okay.
So yes, so it's not like we close the door and we just say, well, we wanted to do certain projects 30 years ago, and those projects, well, we missed the boat, we're not gonna revisit that. We kept revisiting the same issues over time.
Okay, so the last meeting that I was at, that you had at the school, and your consultants were there, you were looking at adding a population of somewhere between 6,000 to 10,000 people in the next 20 years. Okay? You're looking at building somewhere between, at that time, another 4,000 to 6,000 housing, mostly up in the north section of Tullahoma. Okay? So if you're looking at expanding that by 2040, why would you not look at, what am I going to do from 2022 to 2025 to meet the requirements that you set back in the year 2000? Why aren't you looking at a 2030 plan that says things like, well, we need to improve our sidewalks?
Those are master plans.
Excuse me?
Those are master plans that are more detailed, and this is a more overarching. And I'm gonna let Mary comment, but we just had that question in the air.
No, well, I understand it's an overarching one, but my question is, if we're spending the money on a consulting service, which somebody could tell me, or I could look at the things, how much have we already spent on consulting services, to look at 2040 when we haven't even accomplished half of what we wanted to do in the year 2000? So why aren't we looking at, okay, what can we do to improve our sidewalks? I know when you make a right-hand turn off of Jackson Street onto Washington, which is Cedar Lane in Washington, okay? The 18-wheel trucks run up over the sidewalk. They've crushed the sewer system there. So why aren't we looking at those things that need to be taken care of now, rather than trying to figure out and pay a huge consultant fee to figure out what we're going to do in 2040, when we haven't even been able to accomplish what we were going to do in 2000?
There are, hold on, let me answer, please.
Mayor, let me comment. One of the things about the other plans that we have had in this city, we have never before gone out and gotten the public engagements that we have for this plan. That's the difference. What we're doing, this is the 2040 plan. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen gradually over the period of time that we're talking about. We're talking about 2030 instead of 2040. Well, okay, this accommodates that. Now, if we can get your input, we can make this plan things that will work for the future. So just because we haven't accomplished things that were in this plan 20 years ago, don't need to, shouldn't look forward. As far as the growth in the city, you saw words in our plan that says we could grow like 56,000 people by 2040. Right. That's if we put a house on every available spot of land that was out there to build on. Okay. Now, the reality is, Tullahoma's been growing about 1% a year. Okay. About 200 people a year. That's what's going to continue. Economic development's going to determine how we're going to grow. It's not how much available land we've got to build a house on. So, for somebody to think there's going to be 56,000 people in Tullahoma during this plan's lifetime is not what's in the plan.
No, I understand that. I think the plan is...
Hold on, wait.
I think the
Hold
plan,
on, ma'am, I'm sorry, can we, hold on.
I'm sorry. I'd like to respond to his comment while he just had made it, because you said that the existing conditions show the total build out, that would be 58,000. So my question is, and I understand that would be if every single property were built out to the highest density that it's zoned for currently, we would get to that 58,000 number. So my question is why would we even consider changing lower zoned properties now to higher zoned possibilities and to do the higher density when right now we have the possibility to grow, whether it's in 20 years or 30 years, to 60,000. Why? And so my question is with the zoning ordinance and with the overlay, which would then make it more difficult to oppose rezoning requests, why would we increase the density that's possible for Tullahoma? And my question has been, and I haven't been able to get this answer, but with that map, what would the potential build out be? If our current zoning is 58,000, what's the potential build out based on what is in the 2040 plan?
I don't understand your question.
Wait a minute.
Well, okay, so right now you're saying the potential build out is 58,000 in Tullahoma. That's what's the existing conditions section of the plan says. So you've proposed different zoning overlays. So you're saying take that agricultural and put a TNN, which is traditional neighborhood new, which is a high density urban place type as it's referred to in this plan. So that changes when you are creating that formula to get to 58,000. Right now, there's several sections that are agricultural that would have one, because that's one person, one housing unit. So if you change that to TNN new, that gives you for best comparisons, the R3, the high density. So that changes in your formula a 1 to I'm not sure what that number would be. So when you add up all those different numbers, and right now you get to 58,000, what would that number be if you added up the possibility under this new plan with the higher density proposals?
I don't know. Okay. Haven't run those numbers. I don't think anybody has. But keep in mind, where you see high density housing on this map, the market's going to determine where some high density housing We need, one of the things that the study showed is that we do not have apartments or condos for people that want to live in an area that they don't have to have a 2-acre lot to take care of.
But R1 allows for quarter-acre lots?
That's correct. And that's where a lot of houses are that size. But that's why we've got some high density on here, is so that we could accommodate the higher density, to accommodate those people that want to live in that type of environment. So,
But why put the high density over the entire town of Tullahoma when it could be if someone has property that they want to rezone, then you would go through the normal rezoning process, and it would not, the city would not say then, oh, but our 2040 plan says that this is what we want it to be. We're okay with it being high density urban.
well, it lets a developer look at where he might develop, is what that density, high density shows that you
Mayor,
could.
But the plan.
Mayor, can I try to answer this question
Yes.
if you
Go
don't
ahead.
mind to? Also, if you look at the current plan, the 2012 plan, which I believe we brought a copy in, the only properties that are designated for apartments and townhomes are existing neighborhoods. It's on the map, I can show anybody that wants to see it. So the 2012 plan, the high-density residential for the R3 and the R4 are existing neighborhoods that is financially unfeasible for a development to come in. So if a developer wanted to build, and I've experienced this at my job, developers are coming in saying, we want a piece of property that we want to develop 30 apartment units on.
So the market.
They say, let me finish, please.
Sure.
So they say, we want to do 30 apartments somewhere. Where is the land available? And so I show them where the R3 zoning districts are. They're existing neighborhoods. So that would mean me as a developer would have to come in, and I need a 2-acre site to do 30 units, theoretically. I would have to buy up 2 acres worth of people's houses. So I'd have to buy 2 blocks, like 10 or 12 houses, demolish all those. Those people would have to move somewhere, and then I would build it. So the thought is that creating these new areas, it's not that we're trying to necessarily force higher density residential into suburban areas. We are looking for vacant land.
Yeah.
But if the
So
market.
you need vacant land
But
in
if the
order to
market-
build larger development.
But if the market determines, then if the market is there, then the developer would be willing to do what he needs to do.
But
And-
they're not. They're
But
not
then the
willing.
market's not pushing for those
The market's
apartments.
not pushing for it. Where's the requirement? Where's the requirement that says we need 75 townhomes?
There is no requirement.
Exactly.
So why are you planning for one?
Because, hold on, no. I'm sorry, I've got to control this because I've got to take these comments. First of all, let me answer your question that never got answered.
Okay,
And I'm not trying to be rude to anybody, I got it.
okay.
We have to do this methodically. One, have you had a chance to review the plan?
Yes.
Okay, so in the plan, there's a whole map and whole sections about where sidewalks are supposed to be built.
Uh-huh.
And then there's also a whole section of what intersections need improvement in the next 20 years. The intersection of William Northern and Cedar, and Cedar Lane and Wilson is one of those designated intersections. So the
Right.
city is well aware of that intersection that needs to be improved, and actually TDOT is already doing an analysis of that intersection.
Okay.
So that answers your question. So this plan is not just about the place types map. It includes road improvements, school improvements, utility improvements, parks, government facilities, what else is in here?
Housing.
Housing, economic development, employment. So that's why we mean a comprehensive plan. So we're looking at all of those elements.
Okay. So my question to that is,
So then,
I don't believe that those are new goals. I
No.
believe those were goals
Right.
probably for the last 40 years,
Yeah.
right?
right,
So why haven't we done anything to attempt to solve those problems and meet those goals in the last 20 years, that here we're spending a lot of money to try to figure out where we're going to be 20 years from now?
I've only been here a year and a half. That would be a question for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and probably the previous planning staff, why those things weren't implemented.
Right.
But just because they haven't been implemented doesn't mean we're gonna give up on those ideas. We're
Well,
gonna keep trying to pursue it and get it implemented now.
I'll use an analogy. If I own a house and my house after 5 years old, I start investing in it to do maintenance on it.
Right.
Okay? I do that at 10 years, I do that at 15 years, I
Right.
do that at 20 years. Okay? I don't wait until the house is falling down before I do any improvements to it.
Right.
And then hope that I can sell my home and buy some new home 5 miles out of the city of Tullahoma. That's not what most Tullahomans do.
I know, that's why we have a plan, so we can get ahead. That's why you don't wait till the last minute when you're having growth that's unplanned for and you don't have the infrastructure to support it. You have a plan, so incrementally, over time, you chip away at it and you get the
Was
improvements
there
done.
ever anything that said that you had a requirement from somebody that they wanted to build some, like apartments or something in any of these areas?
That's what I was gonna say.
What do you mean? I don't understand what you mean
Well,
by
I guess,
required.
did the demand ever come?
The housing analysis shows
Yeah.
that we need X amount of homes, and I think it says 400
Yeah,
apartments.
there's a housing analysis said that there's a housing demand.
So once those apartments are built,
For-
then we would remove the ability to build those houses.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
the
that's
total
what I'm
market
getting at.
demand.
So there's a housing
Getting at.
analysis.
The
This is-
total market demand for the next 5 years, it's on page 34, the total projected market demand for real estate market for the next 5 years is between 450 and 900 total housing units of all types. So there's a demand that,
So when Tullahoma gets to 400 to 900, then we're gonna stop approving the additional units if the plan is that here's the market? Or are we going to go out and, I mean, the plan also says we're gonna go incentivize national and regional developers to come in and we're going to pay them to come in. So that's not market, that's going out and saying, please come here. We're gonna give you tax incentives to come and build these developments for people to live here and drive into Murfreesboro and drive into the Amazon warehouse on 24 to work. So, you know, why are we going to actively go out and try to create some artificial demand for apartment houses in Tullahoma?
but we're not creating an artificial demand, that's what I'm trying to say. There is, but
Then-
a house.
I'm sorry, why are we as part of your answer, if you can answer then why we're gonna incentivize outside builders to come in and do that?
Okay, so there is a housing demand for there's a housing demand that the economists did. We paid for a specific housing study to be done as part of this plan. He determined that there is definitely a demand for several hundred apartments and townhome units, that we're severely limited in our available inventory of those. So if there's a low inventory of apartments and townhomes, that increases the demand for it. Similarly, through the course of my work, I am having people saying, I want to move to Tullahoma, or I would like to move to a better apartment or townhome, but I can't find one. So there's just no supply of them. I have tried to find a local developer that does apartments and townhomes, and I can't find one. The local builders and developers around here only do for housing, single-family housing. So that's why then we would look outside to try to find somebody that could actually complete the project. Part of the survey that we completed specifically asked a very general question: what type of housing would you like to see come to Tullahoma? 40% of the majority was single-family houses at 53%. Then the next 40% was mixed-use development within one project. So one development that had a couple phases of single-family, then some townhomes and apartments. The next most popular was apartments and then townhomes, with hundreds of people responding. 1,200 people responded. So therefore, that tells the consultants and me that hundreds of citizens said they would like to see more apartments and townhomes in Tullahoma.
So
It's that simple.
That's what we're
I mean, it's not that simple, but that's why we're
Were those
designating properties to be apartments and
Were those
townhomes
people
based on their
within
request.
Tullahoma or outside of Tullahoma? The survey, who did you ask the questions of?
The Tullahoma residents.
But was it limited in who could respond?
No,
So you don't know if it's Tullahoma residents?
I would assume so. Why would somebody that doesn't live in Tullahoma?
I mean, I'm just asking. We don't know.
But, okay, I have a question. Why does that matter? If they live in Tullahoma or they don't live in
Or
Tullahoma.
they live in Manchester,
There are
Shelby.
people that I see online all the time that live in Tullahoma, or that they're looking for a place to live and they can't afford it, and there's no apartments, there's no townhouses, there's nothing but houses, and some of these people can't afford a house right now, and they have nowhere to go. So they're either having to live with their families or live with somebody else, and they can't afford it. They want a place to live, and they're limited. They can't, so it doesn't matter whether they live in Tullahoma currently or they don't live in Tullahoma. They want a place to live.
But how is an apartment that's gonna be, the rent is gonna be, I mean, the rent, there's places to rent in Tullahoma, and if the apartment comes in,
There aren't any places to rent.
there may not be vacancies, but there are. They're building one, there's one under construction right now that's 2 buildings, one in front of the other, that is behind the ATM, near Piggy's place. It's,
On Moore Street?
I'm not sure what the road
Yeah,
is.
that's-
It's off of, but there's one building that's gonna be, it's 2-story, and there's 10 houses, and then there's another building that is barely 10 feet away from the front of 2 of the places.
Well, and then, okay, we can keep going. I don't want, again, the purpose of this is to try to get comments on proposed edits, not necessarily, I'm here to answer any questions or concerns that you have, but I don't want to get like obviously in a huge debate. I have to be able to take some sort of document back to the planning commission
have a
and
question.
the board about what things that you would like to see specifically changed, just to frame the discussion.
Mary,
Yeah.
my name is Dave Woodward. I live at 128 Hunters Ridge,
Okay.
which on the map is way north. So if you look at our community,
Yeah.
there's nothing that can be built around us because it's all county land.
Okay.
But my question is Avoca Lake Road.
Uh-huh.
If you come down Avoca Lake to the left there, there's plenty of, well, I guess my question is, if a developer wants to develop a piece of property and you said a road study has to be
A traffic study?
a traffic study, how many proposed units in a neighborhood would be required for that study?
The code says 75.
Because we have 80, I believe, in our neighborhood. And Avoca Lake is, I mean, it's busy because there's 2 subdivisions back there, but I also see, you know, there on the left as you're going down that big proposed area that's to be developed. And of course, there's various ways in and out of there. You don't have to go down Avoca Lake over to Raleigh Creek to come out. So I don't know if that big area there, would that require a traffic study?
The codes, the subdivision regulations state that any residential project over 75 units or at the discretion of the city engineer. So we have had instances where the subdivision of less than 75, you know, it's 50 lots, but we know that it's on a road that has had significant traffic increase since the last traffic study was done, so we require that developer to do a traffic study on the fly.
And I will just say from my perspective, I've been here 7 years. I moved from Northern Virginia where I lived in an area of 6 million people. So I know what growth and congestion is. I dealt with it, didn't like it, but it was just part of what I had to deal with working up there. And like my wife said, if you go into any of these Tullahoma websites on Facebook, people are constantly trying to find places to live for their families. I emailed you the other day with my concerns about taking care of our 20% of those people that live in Tullahoma that live at or below the poverty level.
Yeah.
Where's our humanity as a whole, as a community, if we don't look out for them? I understand I like my almost $500,000 home. It's more money than I thought I'd ever have in my life. I grew up poor. So we got to take care of our people.
Right,
But a 2-bedroom duplex, because there's nothing else for them to move into.
So,
right.
In the whole area,
right.
just not Tullahoma.
And I hear what you're saying, and I
Yeah.
do know that,
And I just don't want everything killed because everybody doesn't want you know.
Well, again, that's what I'm trying
Yeah.
to explain, that we're trying to find a consensus at this
Yeah.
point. I do know that I can speak on the fact that Mr. Brooks, who's our economic development director, and myself, we are constantly trying to recruit employers into the city recruit employers into the city, and one of the issues is that the employers, when we drive them around town or we talk to them about Tullahoma, they ask specifically for themselves sometimes, well, where am I gonna live? What's the housing market like? And that they directly play into each other is what I'm trying to say. Economic, you wouldn't necessarily think so, but housing does have an economic input where a lot of people that, the reality, people want to move here, but they want to move here and open businesses and employment sources, but they want to be part of this community as well. They want to live and work here. They don't necessarily just want to open up a business here and then have to live somewhere else and commute in. They want to be part of this community.
Hey, Mary,
Yes, sir.
when a property's developed, who determines the size and the price point of the housing to be built in that neighborhood?
The market does.
Because I agree, affordable housing is needed, but what constitutes affordable housing? I mean, Jesus, today you can't build a house for less than 300,000.
Yeah.
Typically, it depends on the area that you're in, so the immediate market of the surrounding area. So you wouldn't necessarily be building a HUD housing or a Section 8 apartment in the most affluent part of town.
Sure.
Nor would you necessarily be building an $800,000 house in the lower income part of town. That's how just basic real estate market works, that we can't control. Again, and that goes into like the number of subdivisions coming in and the number of houses being built.
So
we can't control the real estate market.
When the Walker Collective Group and your group was going through this initial plan, and they did all these areas that are in yellow that have the polka dots. Is that was that just areas that they drove around the city and noticed that was vacant, that said these areas could be developed? Is that how that was determined, or was it a developer that come through and said, hey, I think Anderson Farms would be a good area to develop, or Outdoor Daniels behind out in his area? So how were those areas determined?
Those areas were determined, they were areas, I specifically had a discussion with the consultants about this.
Yes, ma'am.
Those were areas that had relatively large lot size that were under single ownership.
Got it, okay. I didn't know how they were determined that.
And for the most part, were on main roads that could handle at least the traffic.
Yes, ma'am.
And again, these are just, the plan is never intended to, nor does this plan, it's not a site-by-site basis. It's very broad, so that's why there's big areas. Of course, within these big areas, there's a wetland, there's a floodplain, there's things that obviously could not be developed, but it's something like, in this general area, you can consider.
So we don't even know that people who own those properties would be willing to sell.
Well, exactly, and that's why it's never been the intent, and again, it says it in the housing study and in the market analysis, that all of these areas in the polka dots would be developed. The reason why the consultants put so many is to increase the likelihood that one of these property owners would want to sell the development.
So what if,
not all of them, one of them. So as an example, if we limited it to, and we certainly could, say we take rid of the entire TNN, traditional neighborhood new, place type, and just left it on one piece of property, say this one.
Yeah.
If this property owner is a farmer and he never sells, then that's the only place that we could have had that mixed-use product. If he doesn't develop, then that never gets implemented.
But it could be implemented if someone bought the property and requested a rezoning request. But by putting the polka dots on the land that is out there, the wetlands, the floodplains, the undeveloped areas in Tullahoma, are you not making it more difficult for a rezoning request to be denied? Because part of what you're doing in this plan implementation is changing the zoning. And it becomes,
I don't understand what you're saying. I'm sorry, we're not changing the zone. All zoning has.
When we've talked before, you've said that if the plan shows it as R3, then that's, or if the plan shows it as TNN, then that's, oh, well, of course I'm gonna recommend to approve this zoning request change because this is what the plan says. So it's not going to be limited to the market if we say 400 to 500 apartments or townhomes or whatever it is. And to this lady's point, we can put those in, but right now we don't have anything that, you can't say they're going to be quality homes because what's being approved, we don't have, once that density is there, they have no control over what's built.
So that's not, I didn't say, when we spoke earlier, I didn't say just the only thing that is reviewed is the place types map. When a property comes in to be reviewed for annexation, we look at the comprehensive plan, we look at the place type maps, we look at the surrounding area, we look at the environmental factors on the property, we look at the road conditions, we look at the utility infrastructure. We discussed that when we spoke earlier. So those are the things that we do. This is one of the primary things that we do look at for rezoning. So yes, when and if the plan is adopted, rezonings are required to do a consistency review against the place type. So yes, it would be difficult, if not impossible, for someone to come in. It has to be in the appropriate place type. What could occur legally is if you severely limited, or say you remove all the TNN altogether from the entire map. A developer comes in and they want to buy Mary's Farm and wants to do a traditional neighborhood new project. They could request a comprehensive plan amendment to amend this map at that time to put that place type on that property. That process would have to go before the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen through public hearings. The map then could be changed and then the developer would then come in to do the plan development for the rezoning. So that's also an option, that we could do it on a case-by-case basis for the properties to do the traditional neighborhood deed. That adds several months into the process for the developers. And again, one thought is that if you're trying to get an end result, you try to make the process as simple as possible. So the end result, again, based on the documents that we received and the public input, is the public was interested in this traditional neighborhood new mixed-use products. You try to try to set it up so you have to go through the least amount of public hearings as possible. You still have to meet the codes, and you still have to go through the plan development and get the approvals, but you're just one step closer.
Just to make sure I understand, by adding the dots over the whole map, that just makes it easier for the higher densities developments to occur.
I wouldn't say easier. I wouldn't say easier.
But isn't that what you just said? That it takes away?
I'm trying to be just very honest with everybody here and just trying to educate, okay?
No, I understand. I just wasn't
I'm not
sure.
trying, it's because I'm not trying to, I don't want anybody getting confused with all of this. It's not easier, it's possible. If somebody came in and wanted to do a plan development for a misuse project and the property is only in the suburban neighborhood low land place type, then I wouldn't recommend approval because it's not compliant with the plan.
But
so the dots make it possible to request a plan development.
Do the dots make it more or less public hearings before a higher density area could be placed in a suburban low?
It would be, if the dots weren't present, then it would be less.
Just a second ago, you said it would be more hearings.
Can you repeat your question, Mel?
No, it's okay.
No, I'm sorry.
No, what she said was.
You said that if the dots weren't in place.
It's okay. I'm fine.
You said if the dots weren't in place, because the dots are in place, is that less hearings? Yes, because.
No, I said because the dots, yes.
Because the dots are in place, is it less hearings? Yes, that's true.
Yes, so it makes it easier.
Yes.
For high density.
Right.
Okay. Well, I just asked that question a minute ago and you said no. So I'm just trying to be clear because I don't want there to be confusion.
ask a question on that from an economical standpoint?
Sir, one moment, please.
Yeah, sure.
Pat, do you have a question?
I do. So what I'm hearing is there's new proposed zoning, and it's based off of what we believe is the market and the challenges to get developers to come in and provide some of this high density housing. So what, help me understand, based on our current plan and our current regulations and laws, that prohibit somebody from coming in and doing that now with our current zoning? Because my understanding is we're zoned to be able to grow 3 times our size, which I would think logically with our real estate that we have would require some high density housing zones. So what is it that prohibits somebody from coming in and building that type of housing now?
So your question is, what is prohibiting people from doing apartments and townhomes now under the current zoning?
Yes.
The lack of available land and inventory.
But couldn't somebody come in and say, one of these farms is for sale and we're going to buy it, can we get it rezoned?
If it's not in the appropriate land use category, that wouldn't be our recommendation for approval. So it has to be in the appropriate land use category. So if under the current plan, a farm isn't going to be in a high density residential land use category, which would lend itself to a rezoning. So that's what I'm saying about the lack of inventory for the potential for these sites.
So how does the?
So, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just, so if the current build out shows that the current zoning would allow for up to 60,000,
Go ahead.
then there could be property that could be R3 right now. They're just choosing not to do it.
The total build out for 60,000 is based on the zoning for the entire city, not just the multifamily and townhomes.
So the projected growth
So,
over the next couple of years is 2% a year growth. It's not, nobody's projecting there's going to be 60,000 people coming to town.
I don't,
let's
I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that the current zoning would allow for growth up to 60,000 people. That's what the plan says.
Don't get your question.
I'm trying to,
But right underneath that paragraph,
I'm trying to find this.
projected growth is 2% a year.
While I'm trying to find this, sir, did you have a follow-up question? Please?
You just said that under the current plan, if something's not zoned,
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
under the current plan, if it's not zoned for that specific housing, then you wouldn't recommend it to be used for that. So, because that's what the plan says, you got to go by the plan.
Right.
But in talking about the new plan that's being proposed, that it's just a recommendation and the board doesn't have to follow that. So, I don't understand why it would be different between the two plans. Either it's a recommendation and it's kind of a guidance and you can still change it depending on the scenario, or they have to follow it. You're saying right now if it's a farm, well, it's a farm, we can't recommend it, they can't change it because that's what the plan says. But then when we talk about some of the aspects in this proposed plan, you try to ease it by saying, well, it's just a recommendation, it's just a guidance, we don't have to follow it.
If I understand what you're saying, yes, somebody under the current plan, the 2012 plan, could request a land use change to change a farm from low-density residential to high-density residential. That would have to go before the planning commission and board or mayor and alderman. It could be adopted, and then they would come in to rezone to R3 or R4. Yes, that is possible.
So then why did you say you wouldn't recommend it?
I didn't say that. I said if somebody came in and requested a rezoning, but they were in the low-density residential land use category still, I wouldn't make a recommendation. You have to be in the right land use category first or now we're calling them place types. So the bottom layer is the plan map, so you have to be in the appropriate land use or place type for consideration of then the zoning districts. So it always has to start with the plan. So you would have to, if the plan doesn't support your rezoning, you can request to change the plan. If you don't request to change the plan, when we do a rezoning analysis based on the existing category, if it's not appropriate, then we recommend it.
So the plan's adopted.
Is it no problem?
We do have to follow it as it's written.
Yeah, it's a guiding document. Yes, you have to review it for consistency. I see you, hold on one second. I want to make sure we get to everybody, because there are a lot of people here that haven't even spoken or asked questions, and I don't know if they want to, or, is there anybody else, questions, concerns? Sir, Mr. Glick, yes?
Can this, have you determined whether this plan has to be adopted by the, I know there's some question about whether this plan had to be adopted by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, or, and if it is, can the plan be amended or changed at any time, or is there a time constraint to change it?
Yes, I've gotten a legal opinion from the city attorney. There is no time constraint of when a plan can be amended. So if the plan is adopted by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen in 2 months, it could be amended 2 months later, or recommended for an amendment. So in order for the plan to be a consistency review, then yes, the plan needs to be adopted by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
You can make amendments to that. The board can recommend, they can't amend it directly, right? They recommend to the planning commission?
Yes, any change, to any amendment to the comprehensive plan has to go through the planning commission first, and then it goes to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for final approval. Yes, sir.
Can we switch to a different subject?
As long as it relates to the comprehensive plan, yes.
Economics, okay? Does the plan that they went through, did they do an economic analysis on real estate taxes and how that's going to affect the city?
Did they do an economic development
Analysis. In other words, let's say you meet this plan and you get 60,000 people there. Obviously, that's going to bring a huge amount of money.
60,000. Nobody's bringing 60,000 people to
I know.
That's not the question I'm asking.
I know, but that's
I'm asking the question, was there an economic analysis that said, if we go forward with this plan, how does it affect the taxes and the amount of money that the city needs to bring in to maintain all of this? Was that done?
I don't believe there was.
No.
So, are you serious? You
Yes,
didn't
sir.
do an economic analysis to determine whether the city could financially support this growth?
I think you misunderstand. I mean, the plan is not like we're going to go and start bulldozing things down.
Excuse me?
We're not going to start changing everything. The plan is a planning tool for the staff to administer growth as it comes.
Okay, I'm sorry, but with my experience, if I'm gonna go build my house, the very first thing I do, I wanna figure out if I can afford it, okay? And do I have enough money and income to maintain it? I would think the city would do the same thing. If we're gonna do a land use development, there should have been first an economic analysis that says, how much revenue are we gonna bring in? And will the amount of revenue that we bring in support this growth? So for instance, if eventually, if you bring in, say, 5,000 a year, okay? Where is the new fire departments? Where's the police to support that? Where is the road infrastructure? If you put all of that up here in the north, there's only 2 ways to get out of there, Riley Creek and Avoca. So there should have been an economic analysis that says, okay, if we do this, how much more revenue are we going to bring into the city, and will that amount of revenue support what we have? It's no different than, can you afford to go out and buy a $150,000 Mercedes right now? You probably can't, because your income doesn't support it. So if you can't do an economic analysis first before you go out and decide, let's do this huge expansion, you don't even know if you can support it from an economic standpoint.
They can do what they've never done, is raise taxes appropriately for the infrastructure that they needed. And that is why none of the other plans have been fully implemented.
Right.
There was no money totally available there, or they couldn't get it from grants or other sources of money fully implemented.
Right.
Same thing happens here. Even if this plan is adopted,
right,
it will be implemented partially and over a period of time. And the mayor and the board of mayor and aldermen have to adjust the taxes or find income sources in order to support that.
Right.
So it doesn't make any difference whether the first 5% is done in the first 10 years and the last 95% is done in the last 10 years of a 20-year plan. It all has to be supported as circumstances indicate.
I agree
so
with that.
An economic plan, and I understand what you're talking about, it kind of makes sense that you think about that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's still not applicable in the situation because they will make up their mind on an instance by instance basis. Now whether it's right or not, or we agree with it as a citizen or not, that's a total different thing. And we can do our voting to make sure we know who we want in there to implement the plan as we want it implemented. It's all, there's fail-safes in this whole thing.
Right, so yes, the plan based again on the market study and the housing development impact is planning for the required infrastructure to support that. There's talk about a need for a new fire station, an additional school, road projects, sidewalks. So the infrastructure needed to support the additional population is planned for.
Right.
The economic impacts of that, it's too complicated of a question. It's not a yes and no, meaning part of it would be funded by the city, part of it would be funded by private developers, part of it would be grant. It's not that the money would be coming from one source.
Oh, I understand that.
Okay.
But my question was, did we look at it from an economic source? Did we say if we implement this plan, we're going to get 20% of the money from grants, we're going to get 40% of the money from new land sales, which will then not increase taxes, but will bring in more taxes because you have more houses. We're going to get 30% from here. The federal government's going to provide this amount, or the county's going to provide this amount.
But it would depend on what part of the plan you're discussing. Are you talking about the new school? Because there's different funding sources for schools. There's different funding sources for road improvements. There's different funding sources for sewer and water. So yes, so all of that was analyzed, but it wasn't. All of the options were reviewed, and they talked about funding source options in the back of the plan and in the implementation schedule.
Okay. I guess I'm not asking the right question the right way. I'm trying to understand from an economic standpoint, does this plan make sense?
Yes, I believe that.
And what is that based upon? Your answer is yes. What is it based upon? That the plan makes sense. What economic analysis was done that you think that this plan makes sense?
And I would say that the mayor and the alderman decide if it makes sense.
But they're not economic experts.
No, it doesn't make any difference. They will only allow what they can tax you to happen. Okay?
Wouldn't you want to know the economic analysis prior to, so that you know that, hey, this is how much this is going to cost, and would that make us unreasonably raise taxes, or is it an amount that we could say with good conscience, we need to raise taxes and we're going to need to support this, this, and this? Wouldn't you have a plan for each area to say, and so that when you're telling developers, we'll reduce your taxes, you have to pay us. It says incentivized through tax abatements in the plan. So if you're telling developers that, then wouldn't you want to know what that cost is going to be and how it's going to be made up in other areas? How can you negotiate with developers properly if you don't know or have any idea of where that money and how the projects are going to be funded? And if an economic analysis was done to where those ideas and that information is there, then share it with the citizens so that we can have a better understanding of why. But I would like to ask the same question that the gentleman asked. You think this is an economically feasible plan? What is that? What do you base your answer on?
That I believe that.
No, not what you believe. I'm asking what you based it on.
I'm sorry,
When I go
no,
do,
no,
when
no.
I go do a
I'm not
scientific.
here to be interrogated. I'm trying to answer the question.
Yeah, but you don't want to answer the question.
Yes, I'm trying to answer the
Okay.
question.
When I go do a study, okay, I do peer review journal articles when I want to put a new drug out there, okay? My question is, what scientific empirical data was done to say that you can economically support this plan? I could sit here and say, I believe this plan's going to work, but how am I going to convince anybody that this is going to work if I haven't even done an analysis or I haven't done an economic impact, even just a basic economic impact plan?
Which part of the study of the plan, I think that it's a very, and sorry to step, but I think that that's a very vague question, right? So even if we pass the place types map, that doesn't guarantee nobody can develop in any of those places, right? So we can't predict. We're not building, we're not.
Okay, what about the roadway part?
This is just a guide.
We're not implementing that.
Well, you have implementation schedules in the back to start implementing immediately.
Can you take a break?
Yeah.
Please, take a 15-minute break.
Will you answer his question when we get back?
Yes, I've been trying to, but.
Sure you want to run for re-election?
Interrupting me.
Thank I'm Elizabeth. I'm an attorney.
Okay.
I actually work in the securities industry, but securities industry, regulatory. So like financial firms. Oh, okay. Yeah.
And the city is supposedly incentivized developers by paying for engineering studies, due diligence, fast track.
Go to Chattanooga to
You know, like this is so nice. We would have highways. Of course, you go magically over here.
And funding of the creation of assets in the city is supposed to incentivize development.
I totally agree. I think the city incentives. I mean, I think this whole plan is conversation. You know, here's where they, right here under the existing conditions, it says, and I don't think that this is the most current version of the plan because it has the quarter of an acre as 10,000 square feet. But here it says, just on the growth, which is, you know, like, let's move on because there's so many other issues.
Right.
It says the city's current zoning features much more residentially zoned land than will be needed to satisfy market demand for many years to come. So we've got that, you know, we've got that, and they want to plan for all of this. You know, they want to say, oh, well, okay, where's your analysis? Where's your money's going to come from?
Right.
Like, this is what we're going to
So, my background,
Yeah.
Bachelor of Science in Business Management, and I have a Bachelor of Science in and I have a Master's in Organizational Leadership and Global Acquisitions and Mergers.
And so why would that land you on that instead of Dan Marcus' daughter or,
Well, I don't know. When that kid's trying to move on and they really start asking these questions, you become obvious.
Oh, I know. I mean, yes, I understand. Which, you know, they don't want involvement unless you are going to do this
Right.
I agree.
And I'm all for growth.
Let's just plan for it and talk about, yes, that's what it says. Growth is coming, so why don't we plan instead of trying to as quickly as possible?
Does it say in there how much we spent on this?
Well, why have we, this is my other question, but she's having a difficult time deciding if she wants to let you continue talking or ask me what my question is. Why do we pay consultants when MTAS does this for free?
Why do we take what?
Why did we pay consultants for this when MTAS does it for free?
Yeah. I've asked them several times about their contract at Avoca and Riley Creek, where it's splits there. We've been complaining. And the person that owns that plant has tried 5-6 different times to put a different gas station on that.
Did you have some of your concerns or questions answered or anything?
$385,000 for it, and it just sits there.
All the other departments. The ones that are actually after doing it.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
But I honestly felt like on this end of the room, you couldn't hear what was being said.
It is true. It's disappointing because people learn from hearing.
It was really to be respectful of people's time because we had so many people here and we had only one person answering questions. And I don't know, everyone that was in my group seemed very happy with the way that our meeting was conducted.
I feel that way.
If you've been asked to be on a steering committee,
Absolutely, I would have.
if you've been asked to be on a steering committee,
What?
if you've been asked to be on a steering committee,
I would. Nobody's ever asked.
I've had an application in to be on the planning commission for 3 years. Last year, 2 positions were filled, and the mayor told me that it's because he did it based on when people put their application in. This year, my application has been in over a year, but guess what? It's not my application that's been picked. So I think he must have changed how he chooses people to be on the planning commission.
this plan was developed, and the steering committee said it was hand chosen.
That is too
You
true.
go out and solicit the for the steering committee.
Oh, for the steering
Steering
committee? No,
committee.
we didn't. The mayor appointed members to the steering committee. But what I'm saying is, saying the plan was only developed on their input is not true.
No.
We had hundreds of people at every elementary school that I went to.
And maybe some input from you and the planning with the steering committee. What I'm saying is some of this, it's not your fault. It's just how it's done.
I guess, Jennifer, the comment I'm sorry, your name again. Elizabeth that I made was, my background, I retired from Jacobs Engineering, not the one here in Tullahoma, here in Tullahoma. Jacobs Engineering is headquartered in Florida. Okay, they do $15 billion a year around the globe in architectural and engineering services. They don't build a thing. All they do is do economic analysis, buildings, courthouses, hospitals, okay? They build huge government buildings, okay? I have a Bachelor of Science in Management. I have a Bachelor of Science in Engineering. I have a master's degree, okay, in organizational leadership and global business analysis. She's a lawyer, and when we ask these questions, we don't get the answers that we're asking. We get, well, because I believe it. I asked the question, what was the economic analysis that was done as to whether we could economically support this as a city? Well, there wasn't one done. Well, how do you know this is going to work? Well, I believe it works, okay? To me, that's like saying, here, take this drug, put it in your body. There has been no analysis done on it. It hasn't been peer reviewed. It hasn't gone through the New England Journal of Medicine or anything, but I believe it'll help you. So why don't you just take it? And that's the impression that we're getting.
I'm sorry about that. I know we did use an economist on the team,
Okay.
but his scope was very specific. We asked him to do housing market feasibility, because one of the things that we were hearing from employers and from citizens is that we did not have a diverse mix of housing, that we didn't have places for people to transition here. So when somebody, and Rich Ellis at the hospital can tell you this, we lost the doctor from Texas because he could not find a place to rent, and he was not willing to sell his house in Texas, or he wasn't willing to buy a house here before he sold his house in Texas. And so they lost that doctor of being able to recruit. But that's just one story. We've heard it over and over again, that people saying, I don't think you have enough units of rental, you need some apartments and some townhomes. And so we asked him, do the analysis to show us that there's a market for that. Because we know there are people who want to build here, and they will build here, but they'll only build single family. How do we show them we really have a demand for that?
The demand is here because people are already doing it, okay? I spoke to a builder here that has built 15 homes in the last 5 years. Let me finish. Out of those 15 homes, okay, 11 of them came from California. 3 came from New York, okay? 2 came from San Francisco. They're coming from the outside because they can sell their house for $5 million in California, and they can come and buy the exact same thing here for $600,000. So you're looking at it from the wrong perspective. This doctor that came from here, obviously he didn't want the job enough, okay? So when I worked with my company, they didn't guarantee that they would buy my house or sell my house. It was my responsibility to make that decision to either buy or sell my house. So if I made the decision to do that and to come here, which I did, that's my decision. Just because a doctor's not willing to do that, you shouldn't be trying to build something to fit that scenario.
And once the higher density is, but once the higher, once the higher,
what economic analysis has been done
for the whole plan, not just for the whole plan.
I understand, which it wasn't done. That is the answer. It was not in the scope of work of what we wanted to do, and it wasn't done. It wasn't a part of this planning exercise. But we did have the economists look at 2 things. One was housing market, and did we actually have demand for diverse types of housing? Because it's clear we've got a demand for single family. But what we're hearing is, we don't know that we're not, from builders, we're not willing to take the risk for these other types. Then the other thing is, and you saw
Is this on camera still?
a lot of,
That's why I said.
a lot of citizens have talked about wanting a public gathering space. You heard a lot about, maybe it needs to be downtown, on that bank property, there was a concept that came out. But in general, nobody said it's got to be in a specific spot. We just heard it over and over again that we're missing that in our cities. We don't have this central space, or we don't have this gathering space. So he studied the feasibility of the venue.
Well,
And it was that there is not one. A venue is not feasible, is what his study said. But I have a question about the downtown corridor and the way that it was indicated on the plan, and where it stopped at, I believe, Urpud, and it did not go down the next 2 blocks that would be needed to bring in the Fine Arts Center in South Jackson. And typically, Tullahoma has always considered South Jackson and the Art Center as its downtown area. So why would that be stopped and not include South Jackson and the Fine Arts Center in the downtown corridor?
So I'm with you. So I think that it's another one of those things. You're an attorney. Don't you guys always say, if you would get a bunch of attorneys, they've all got a different opinion?
No, I've never heard that,
Okay,
but.
well, that's what I feel like has happened. So the planners, they, from their lens that they look at the world through, they talk about character a lot. What is the form of a building, you know, what's the character like? And they were saying that the downtown, it really changes in character. And I can somewhat see that. It does turn more residential between what they're defining as our downtown and where South Jackson is.
Between Urpud and the Fine Arts Center?
Yeah.
It's all commercial.
No, there's a
Between
lot of
Urpud?
historic homes actually.
On
still
one side of
Jackson.
the, yeah, but there's a bridal shop in one of the historic homes, there's a real estate company in another one of the historic homes.
There's a hair place.
There's a hair place, and then on the other side of the street,
I know, you're
it's,
talking about use, I'm talking about what does it look like. This is how planners think.
right, but on the other side,
going,
it's
man?
not historical homes. And then you get to South Jackson, and so, then you get, but I guess it doesn't make,
Look at it through
but
a
okay.
different lens, like more economic.
Okay, no, let's go back to the character. So let's go on the other side of the Atlantic. I hear what you're saying. But who's making the plan?
We are.
So why are you fighting with the consultants?
Because they have professional opinions, and sometimes we agree with their recommendations and sometimes we don't. And this is one where I'm saying, the planners were saying those are different areas, those are different, they have different building types, different character, and they should be different districts. I was saying, I think that it is walkable from South Jackson to downtown, and they could be considered one district. Maybe it doesn't look like that today, but it could look like it in the future.
And the city,
So that is.
and the city owns, and so then there's your public gathering space, because there's already an outdoor music place that's there at South Jackson. And that would take away the need to say in the plan that the plan is to buy traders an ongoing business.
Which would not be the
Demolish
city, I
it.
understand
So
that.
why
That
is
would
it
have
in
to
the
be a private person.
but why is it in the comprehensive plan when?
Because all these other citizens have talked about that to them. I said many times, the city already has a project on the books to continue the light up South Jackson. We already own that as public property, and that's where it should be. And like I said, there's.
So then, now that you hear that.
Where's Bob? It's no different than Bob. We had Bob saying the focal point of this plan should be sustainability. And then you have other people saying, I don't want you using the word climate change or sustainability at all. These are just opposite. We had to figure out
But
a way
so,
to put something in the plan, even though everybody doesn't agree.
I don't think this is the most recent version of the plan, by the way, just because it shows in place types that the suburban low is 10,000 square foot minimum. There's some other changes that were made that I think are missing from this plan, but just FYI.
Well, I want to make sure that we get your comments down, and I thank you for filling it out. And make sure you do that too. Like I said,
Do you have the most recent version?
you know, I would have to ask Winston got those printed for this so that we would have them, and it should be the most recent.
Okay.
I just have one question.
Yeah, they get the same.
And this was what I was trying to ask about from an economic standpoint. Okay? Let's assume you want to.
It goes before the board.
Okay. Go look at $1 million homes. Would you go look at them? Yeah.
No.
Why not?
That's what, outside my bracket.
What do you mean it's outside your bracket?
It's not affordable to me.
Okay. But how do you know it's not affordable to you? I say it is. I say it's affordable to you. Okay? But you say it's not. Okay. That's the answer I got. We believe that it's economically feasible because I believe that. No, show me your empirical data that says this
That is
plan.
not the answer based on, to be honest with you.
But if you hadn't split the groups up,
These
then
exercises.
2 rooms wouldn't be getting different answers.
How you
And
been?
that's another issue that the citizens feel is part of the problem, is that
So we can go back and we also collect these and we'll put them on.
So the way you decided
We're crazy. You know, we need growth in Tullahoma.
You I can afford to do them. I don't make the money, or my husband or my family. I didn't win the lottery, so there's no way I could build $1 million. Okay, you did that to us. Okay, or you probably done it on paper. Okay, what you can afford.
My doctor's coming to the hospital out there. Came
Well,
from the hospital.
the same thing.
So, we leave. And the thing is, this is more than anything else. Affordable apartments and condos.
Well, they're two different things.
I get a ton of calls on that stuff all the time. People
You
want to
shouldn't
know
have
if
an
we got them and they
implementation
sell
plan
as
to
fast
say we're
as
gonna
we
start
stick them up.
rezoning, we're gonna start, build, we're gonna start roads, we're gonna start X, Y, and Z. Immediately is what the implementation plan says in several of these items. So between adoption and implementation, where's your
But it's not
time
just here, it's everywhere.
to marry this with your
It's a huge
budget?
demand everywhere.
And if you're incentivizing developers to come in and to build, and you're trying to attract them,
We don't want that.
what are you gonna base those negotiations on if you don't know what the dollars are
Well,
associated
I
with
got a
the
place I'm fixing to build
And I know you don't get all your money from one point, okay? You get it from the state.
That's why, at a certain
Yep, done got it approved
I think
and
that
everything.
that's why we need your
It's just
comments.
unreal. And
If there's any
you know where you know if you come off the square going towards the hospital, it's right off that bypass right there.
and yes, citizens.
I bought 32 acres right there. Putting it on.
How close to, if you leave the square going toward the hospital, how far out is it?
It's about halfway in between the square and the hospital.
Okay.
Is that any?
You know where the green walking park is?
Yeah.
It's
Oh, yeah,
next
it's
door
a
to
nice
that.
little park
It's
there.
next door to that.
And again, but
Right
that's
next door.
something that we've heard citizens
Yeah.
saying there should be. a
Winchester's-
And you can sell more in Tullahoma than you can anywhere. I guarantee you, this town, it would be easy to,
Yeah, you could.
you know, rent or sell townhomes
So I think
easy.
if you understand that that's the exercise,
It's
the
unbelievable.
exercise was.
But this is the
more
best
along the
town
lines of
selling market.
vision and a-
As far as selling small homes to first starters and stuff like that, this is the best selling town there is. We just don't have the land, we don't have the, you know, the,
When you
and
just
then
ask
every
for
time
it,
you do
just ask
get a
me
piece
the
of land, you
difference
gotta fight a
of
bunch of crazies,
plan, strategic
you know,
plan.
to get it done. And now that we got the city working with us, wanting to build, then, now we got to back it up.
I worked on a
It makes sense, doesn't it?
project.
But Lee Lawson was a lot of our problems in Tullahoma.
You didn't recognize the fact
He was a,
that
there was Mary's there, and Jennifer's there. I mean, it's
And I'll tell you why.
things are turning around.
If you
Even
look
back
at,
in Scott, I mean, things are turning around.
Page 30.
Yeah, great,
and I started asking.
couldn't ask for that.
And guess what?
If you look at
And
the
then
place
now you got
types,
the
I get
public
called a
going crazy.
troublemaker.
You know?
Because
where
I
it
asked
talks about
that the city is not prepared to answer.
density informed
wish you'd been here for the
for
first
And I'm
suburban,
asking those questions, not
Well,
because
I just went over there and filled out
for
an
suburban
application.
low, it says lots are 20
I'm
homes,
asking those questions because I have the
and
experience.
Mary said that suburban low would be a quarter acre.
10 o'clock.
But then suburban medium says 10,000 and it says or a quarter acre. But 10,000 square feet isn't a quarter acre.
When these questions are asked, we always have demand for it.
But I think that there's a more recent version that corrected this 10,000 to 12,000.
When we did those meetings at the.
This is page 51.
We didn't have this
People
stuff.
wanted in their backyard.
So you all were giving input, but you weren't reacting.
They should have bought the land.
These are the meetings are where
Just bought the land.
But
It's the only way I
again,
can control what happens next day.
But before
is
it
my
went
land.
to planning and to.
And that's what needs to be told to them.
Well, and
Said,
I
you
guess
know,
I
you
would
go in
rather.
subdivisions all the time
So
where
I'll wait
somebody
until the
buys a
break.
house here and then they buy the lot on both sides of them. The reason for that is because they don't want nobody close to them. Well, you have to buy it to control it.
There's another one.
Yeah.
For a little bit.
Don't sleep late in the morning.
No, I'll be here. I will. I appreciate it.
this plan document.
I didn't interrupt here.
Yeah, no, I've been saying it.
Oh, God.
How are you?
I have a.
Sorry.
Nah, that's okay.
That's two aldermen
Hopefully they figure it out.
thinking that way. That's not
What's that?
something that's possible.
Hopefully they figure it out.
It's
They've been
ridiculous.
trying for 2 months and they haven't
I do
figured it out.
think
When
that-
they had a lung biopsy done and they
I know one of them
collapsed
that you're
right
talking
along.
about. I don't know who the other person is.
Done.
But Robin Dunn,
And Barry's the one that's
my understanding is what she was trying to say is you could have something worse. I understand those specific examples
well, she did it
are,
after he quit.
yeah.
He
But I
was
think,
arguing with somebody.
When is the break gonna be over?
But
You
right
think it's
now-
wrong now where that could not be done that way?
I
Put
think-
chickens and hogs out there?
I think that we should check, make sure our regulations have something about that in there. Off the top of my
They
head,
couldn't put commercial farming.
I mean-
I think it would have to be agricultural commercial.
I sort of agree with you because I mean, I've looked at it and people can't
I think that
have
was
more than a
just-
few horses.
It's just the
so-
alderman trying to be smart asses.
He is.
That's why I said, I think that the intent
Are we
was
gonna
to say you
continue
can have
or
something
we stop for
worse.
the day?
Right. If-
I'd rather have
What's
a
that?
farm. I don't live near there, so I mean, I don't live behind it. I know.
Are we gonna have
Oh,
something?
do you?
That's my
Is she coming back yet?
Are we,
I think it'll be
Winston, how
approved
much
anyway.
longer until the break's over?
Just a few minutes, I guess.
Before I get started.
I just was curious.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We want to, but if you have comments or something, get the comment sheets and please leave the comment, specific text. I mean, do we have other things y'all want to discuss this afternoon?
Yes.
Okay. It'd be great if we could point to specific things in the actual text.
I've been trying to give page numbers when I,
This little creek right here, this little creek continues, comes back through here, goes down there. This, my property starts over here, ends in the middle of the creek. And then I don't know how far out, I think it goes up in there somewhere.
Does that have a name?
No, it's, it doesn't have any.
It actually looks like so. This is like a flood
And there's an area right down here, TPA, right down in here, it's about an 8-foot dip. And when it rains hard, that gets full. And several times, people had to get rescued out.
That's right.
Well, it used to be the local spot. And it was, there was also one kind of spot. The narco officers, they got a few more, the narco officers live in
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to, you know, if anybody has any other questions, concerns, just come on up.
I thought it was a public, I mean, I like listening to what other people have to say. So is the break over?
Yeah.
I need to leave.
Okay.
Okay, but on it, my last question on an economic standpoint, can you tell me how much we spent so far on doing this in consultant fees?
The board approved the consultant contract, I think it was $200,000.
300,000?
200.
Okay, have we spent all 200?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no, I mean, we still have a little bit more.
175.
We still have a little bit more to spend because they're not done yet.
So on the economic side, my question is, why are we paying an outside consultant fee when Tennessee Municipality in that Knoxville at the university there, they'll do this for free for you? That's what their purpose is.
Okay.
Their
So why
purpose
did
is
we
just,
decide to
so
go with-
why did you decide to go out and pay 300,000 or 200,000 when you could have got it done for free from the state of Tennessee? So you're looking at me with blank eyes. What, is there an answer?
We didn't make a decision. The board of
I'm trying to think, I'm trying to,
Okay.
to think of your, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen chose to hire a consultant to complete this project.
Well, and I think that's why that initial request of having not just planning here and putting you on the spot, but having a public town hall meeting where the questions, you know, if you're not the appropriate person because the Board of Mayor and Aldermen made that decision, that totally makes sense, that you can't explain why they did that. But
On the 19th, correct?
Yes, right, so we still are having that meeting. Again, the purpose of this open house was to get comments from the public about recommended changes at this point that they would like to see. Yes, I mean, I'll answer any question that I can, but we will also be having a meeting, I believe, it's not confirmed yet, but September 19th at the high school at 6 p.m. that will have the planning consultants there, as well as the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the Planning Commission, who are the policy.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. So my understanding is that these 4 input meetings that we're having now are to give the community an opportunity to react to the draft document that's out there on the website, to actually give us feedback and input on this document. And then we will summarize the comments that we're getting. We'll have an opportunity as a staff and with the consultants to make recommendations on revisions. And we'll carry all that information to the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And they're going to be meeting in a joint session. I don't know that Tullahoma has ever done this before, but I think it's really important for this type of planning that the 2 boards be able to meet together in open session and talk directly to one another. It's really important that they both support the same vision and the same plan. And so that's what's going to happen that night. The consultants, right now, we don't really have a presentation planned. What we're going to be doing is giving them feedback on what concerns and issues we're hearing and have them develop their presentation around those topics. And we also believe we'll be ready to make some recommendations on revisions. I expect that there'll be a lot of discussion with the board, and then also we were told that people want, in a town hall style format, they want to be able to ask questions and get answers back. So that is going to be a component of that meeting. So it's a little bit public meeting, but also for both boards to hear from staff what we've gathered from these input meetings.
Okay, my question is, Jennifer, and this is what I don't understand as a citizen here of Tullahoma, and having done this my entire career, the mayor sitting right there, the city administrator sitting right there, one of your aldermen are sitting right there, and the question was asked, why did you go to an outside source and pay to have that done when MT, okay, in Knoxville, okay, could have done it for you for free? And the answer is, well, we don't know. I guess the board just decided on that. How do I, as a resident, take that? As a resident of Tullahoma that I pay taxes for, how do I resolution that between, are my city taxes going for what should be done, and why should I pay for something that I could get for free?
Yeah, so actually, it's part of my job is to make recommendations to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And my recommendation was that we hire an outside consulting firm to perform this work for us. And there's a couple of reasons that I think that's the way to go about it. I really believe in using professionals and experts in their field.
Okay.
And also, I know that when you use professionals, they can do it in a more time-efficient manner.
Right.
So if I have, let's say, Mary is a planning staff of 1 person, and she has her daily duties. If I had put a project of this scale on her, it would take probably double. So this is already a 9 to 12 month typical project. It would have taken much longer than that, especially to get to a drafted document like that with high quality graphics. And so that was my recommendation to the board, and they voted and supported it. And we used a qualifications-based selection process. So we requested proposals, received, I can't remember how many, 5 firms proposed. And then we had a small committee that evaluated all the proposals, picked final candidates. We actually interviewed their team in this room and selected a final one.
So you didn't even look at Knoxville, University of Tennessee at
So I think
Knoxville?
you're talking about MTAS, the Municipal
Yeah.
Technical Advisory Services.
Yes.
To my knowledge, they do not do comprehensive plans.
They do. They absolutely do. I've used them before. And they are professionals, okay? Some of them are graduate students, some are PhD students, and some are undergraduate students. And that's what they do.
Well,
Okay.
some of the things, and I'll just share this, I'm in my 15th year in local government city management. I started my career, my first 2 years at MTAS. I worked for them as a fellow, had my master's degree, was a graduate fellow. And some of the things that they used to do then for cities, they do not currently do for cities. So
Okay.
I will double check that, but to my knowledge, they do not have the staff or the resources to do a comprehensive plan for a city.
Did you want to answer my question?
Well, I mean, if you can get it done for free and it's not costing anything, then why can't you go ahead and get it done and compare it to what they got?
I've offered that.
I mean,
MTAS works,
I've offered that.
MTAS works for the municipalities, not for private citizens.
Right. I've offered that. You know what answer I got? No. We know what we want to do as a city. That's the answer I got. So I step back and say, okay, if that's how you want to run your city, if you don't want to get input from people that have done this hundreds and hundreds of times, she has so much knowledge in this area. You wouldn't believe, okay? I've got 40 years of experience in this exact same business. But when I come and I ask questions that the city can't answer, I get ostracized for causing problems. They don't want to answer the questions specifically because either they don't have the answer or they don't want to divulge it. That's my impression. And I'm sorry, that's not to insult anybody, because that's not my job to insult anybody. My job as a citizen is try to do what I think is best as a resident for me and how my tax dollars get spent. Because I don't believe that the city of Tullahoma understands they work for us. The impression that I get is that the people of Tullahoma don't know as much as the city does.
well, I'm sure that the team they've got now has been doing a pretty decent job, I think.
And I'm sorry
Would you
not to
both mind
insult
if we
anybody.
go ahead and take some other questions?
Yeah, Ms. Dean, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. I
So,
appreciate
wait,
your time.
Don't leave, don't leave. So if the Walker Group, and I totally, understand that they're a professional group, that, professional planners, I don't understand why, and you alluded to the fact that they putting extending 55, of course, having to get rid of Walgreens and, why would they put that if they're a professional group, why would they put that in the plan? If they're a professional group, why would they recommend having the Wattendorf Highway become a commercial corridor when it's already posted no commercial traffic and it belongs to AEDC? Why would they suggest somehow improving, widening roads all the way to extend to the exit 105 so that we can accommodate more Nashville traffic into here? I mean, there are so many crazy things, much less other things that they completely left out. Like I've heard the person from the Arts Council say, we weren't even a part of this plan. And then there are people like the president of Motlow College who attended the very first meeting that said, we want to be a part of Tullahoma. And they're completely not in the plan. So why are these, you're saying that, oh, these are a great professional group, but to me, they did not produce a professional product.
So I'll leave it.
Okay, so there were a lot of questions in your comments. And some of this is my opinion. I think that your questions are very valid and we need to report those back to
Here,
the
if you don't have
team
a copy, you can have that.
and ask that question when we have them here. But what I observed of their work is when we started development of this plan and we had all the meetings at the elementary schools. In each school, we had about 100 people show up at each one.
Every one of them.
And what we were hearing, I think some of these recommendations came directly from things that they heard people saying. And they heard that on the item that I was saying, I really don't think is economically feasible. That's the conversation we were having. But it was said, we need another connection over the railroad or under the railroad. That it doesn't make sense that we only have 2 ways at either end of the city. We need somewhere along Jackson Street another way to get over or under the railroad. So that's where that came from. It was a reaction to what the citizens said they wanted. And she gave us something that probably is feasible to build, but there's so many things that would have to happen that I was saying economically, financially, I don't see that ever happening.
So why would we put something that's not feasible into the plan?
So she's a transportation planner, and that's what I'm saying.
But
Her
it's our
lens,
plan.
It is feasible,
And there's
you could do it. You see
But
what
that's
I'm saying?
that's where the collaboration and why generally comprehensive plans have some idea, in my understanding, to have some idea of here's the costs that are going to be associated. Big picture,
Well,
I
I
understand
think we
it's
should
not going
push
to be.
back. You know, what the purpose of these meetings, what I would record down on your paper is, let's push back on that recommendation. Say, listen, Walker Collaborative, we want another alternative. If that's the only recommendation you've got that we can get over this railroad, we want something else, because that is just financially unfeasible and not practical. And we can say that to them and try to get something that makes more
Professionals,
sense.
why don't they understand that going into this process?
Who their client is and what their client's budget is.
Yeah. And then I'd say similarly to some of the other questions you said, I think their reactions to actual citizen comments. And
But those were,
I
Montclair
think
is
the way
ignored, arts were ignored.
Wattendorf, I remember coming from people saying that we've got a lot of people that are wanting to commute, that are trying to get access. You know, we're pretty far from I-24, and they're wanting to not have to either cut through that back way that you can go up Riley Creek and cut over, or go through Manchester. They were pushing on her to say, well, what's another way that we could get to the interstate faster? And she was looking at that Wattendorf as a way, well, how can I help people utilize that?
So
Well,
do you,
and I think
but
that
is-
they-
so do you think
and
that
I think that
Wattendorf?
they said the truck traffic, to encourage truck traffic on Wattendorf, to facilitate, to get the truck traffic off of Jackson, so the truck traffic would go right from 24th down Wattendorf to get to the industrial areas.
But
That's what they explored, that possibility.
What Ms.
Sure.
Moody just said was widening Wattendorf was to ease commuters' access to Tullahoma, so that if they worked in Murfreesboro,
Or people that
it
live
would be
here,
be easier.
not having to use those back roads that we don't know if those will ever be improved. They have no shoulder now, let alone plans to be widened. So they were trying to say how, and there's a lot of truck traffic
But
on
one
some
of
of
my
those
points,
scary.
you know, one of my points with that is, if the Walker Group is such a great professional planning group, why would you make a suggestion that has absolutely no real possibility? They should have looked into it.
I don't know what her answer is going to be, but I wouldn't be surprised if they say, because this is a 20-year plan, and maybe it becomes feasible over the course of 20 years. But like I said, I think you have a very good question, and we should ask it of the consultants. I'm just trying to give you what feedback I can.
So I had a question about the page up where we talk about the downtown corridor, and you know, just to have everyone else's access to this conversation, where, you know, the question is, why was the downtown stopped at you know, there's the east-west and the north-south. And so I know that there were portions of the downtown corridor that included residential land, residential houses, you know, the older homes in Tullahoma. But when we went towards South Jackson, the downtown corridor stopped at URPUD. And why wouldn't it continue down to include the Fine Arts Center and South Jackson Civic Center, which has traditionally been viewed as a part of Tullahoma's downtown area?
And then, so what I was
I
sharing.
had that question myself.
Yeah, and that's what I was
Remember
sharing
at
with
the steering
Elizabeth,
committee?
that
Yeah.
that precise point, we had like a tug of war back and forth with the consultants. And the best explanation I can give is that, to me, professional planners look through this lens they are looking purely at the form and the character and basically the aesthetics.
But
how does a building present itself? What's its height? What's its setback? You know, and they were saying that the downtown district to them has these buildings that are pushed up to the street, you know, zero lot line, the front door is right at the street. You have buildings very close together or adjoining. That's a particular look. And as you go towards South Jackson, you have a much more residential home character. And they also were making the point that they did not think that it really today is walkable, that people would go to an event at South Jackson and walk and go to dinner at London's, for example.
So they don't.
And we were saying, well, you know, staff and I were saying, but shouldn't we, if we're calling, just like you've seen some of our banners and branding of downtown, we've called it an arts and entertainment district. We're trying to draw that connection, and we think we see a vision for over time of becoming walkable.
But, okay, so here's just my thing, is they're hired, the client is the city. And if the city says, oh, I understand, Ms. Planning Expert, that traditionally this is, but in Tullahoma, we consider this part of our downtown and we want to include it.
Right.
So if we're the customer and they're the ones providing the service, then it seems crazy to me that they wouldn't listen to the client. Then to say that South Jackson is not walkable to London's, and yet we want to have two sidewalks on either side of a sidewalk on either side of the street and bike paths on either side of the street from downtown to Riley Creek Road, because we think people are going to want to walk to town from Avoca, but they're not going to walk from South Jackson to London's. Do you understand how, like, these arguments just, I mean, like, these thoughts, and I'm not saying that it's yours, and I'm not saying arguments in, like, argument, but the preface that they're putting these different items into the plan is based on contradicting
And I am
ideas.
summarizing, but I also think part of, tell me if I'm wrong, Winston, but part of what they communicated to us was keep your downtown district more compact. And they thought if we are truly trying to make improvements to that area, that we're going to have more success doing it in a compact district than spreading ourselves out. Was that part of it?
Yeah, and what you're alluding to too about the style of the building being closer to the road versus as you move closer to there. I mean, so in our minds, it may be, like you said, something we consider downtown.
And I guess it's
a different character.
I do feel like they listened to us and we've amended things and come to agreement on other parts of the plan, but you know, you're definitely highlighting a part that we went back and forth on.
But I think that it would certainly be appropriate, because this is the city's plan. We can certainly
we can
change the map. I mean, we reviewed the map at the steering committee, and we certainly reviewed the maps at the planning commission, and changes could have been made, so like, hey, let's adjust the downtown core and move the downtown core all the way to Carroll, or move the downtown. The boundaries can certainly be adjusted, because again, that's the initial draft recommendation of the consultants. But ultimately, it's Tullahoma's plan, and we can take their recommendations and revise it, like we've already revised this map.
Right, and same thing. So I think that those that are, anybody that has that concern, I think let's get it on paper tonight and let's put down.
I wrote it
that
down.
I think it's, the downtown
Changing the
district
links.
needs to be extended to Carroll.
To Carroll, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
There, and that's very, yes, and that's good input, that's something like tangible that I can take as a proposed amendment.
Yeah.
Right. Reconsider the boundaries of the downtown core. Are there any other further questions or comments on that aspect of the downtown core?
I do think too, like we talked about, because there's some
Boundaries?
historic homes in between, that was another thing that they used when they were making the argument, is that they just didn't think it would change. They didn't think
But
of
it
the-
doesn't have to change. I made the argument back to, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to.
No, tell me.
I made the argument back to them. I go, I think that walking along historic Tullahoma houses is part of the downtown feel as well.
Well,
I think that that's a detriment to a downtown area. I think that you could turn it, and that would be an asset. So you walk from South Jackson and you walk by the historic Harton House and blah, blah, blah. As you go to downtown, I think that creates, it rounds out your downtown district.
Well,
So
there's-
it's not just shop, shop, shop,
There's
shop, shop.
examples, I mean, you can look at Franklin, but the important thing is that the other factors are, encourage because I think it all goes back to there's tools that can be done to preserve the little bit of history that Tullahoma has as far as a bigger town, because it is not as old, it's not the square, it doesn't have, those attractions that some places may have and can build on. But ensure that what is there, encourage the citizens who live in those old homes that they want to, do you want to have a historical overlay? Do you want to have that historical zone?
Right.
But then that also lends to question why in the plan pages would be spent on what several people have told me from the city, and why the front of the plan would be something that is not intended for the city to do, but would be something that would have to be a private citizen, which would be to buy Traders Bank and to tear it down and put an outdoor gathering space on the side of a highway and a farmer's market when the town has two. So we've spent several pages in here and we've put on the front of the plan when I've asked people, they've said, oh no, that's not anything the city would do. When I've asked, city people, city employees, not people on the street. When I've asked city employees, oh no, that's not what we would do. That's something that private citizens would do. So why we would have in our plan that that's what the city wants to do when there already are public and the city just purchased property, I'm not sure where, but for a downtown gathering space. I know that it was mentioned in an article, but I'm not sure where it was. It was mentioned in an article in the news.
Oh, it's the parking lot. Yeah, we already own that property. The parking lot.
Yeah, I just said it was
Yeah.
talking about a grant that was
Yeah.
received and that they had also
Yes.
recently purchased property for a downtown gathering spot.
During the beginning of this process, they had stakeholder group meetings, and so the downtown stakeholders came together and they met with the consultants, and that was an idea that came out of the downtown stakeholders.
And so that's what I was mentioning to you, that even though, obviously as a city administrator, I'm very aware of what capital projects we have in the works. And I had shared with them about the Light Up South Jackson project and how much the city and South Jackson Association had been working together to make that a public gathering space and really utilize the Old Town Square. And they seem to think that they are picking up on this concept, but they're sort of like, well, it doesn't really matter specifically where it goes, because that's true. You could have a developer, we've got a beautiful hillside across from the new police department. The owners of that property have talked about turning that into some new development or a public space or an event space. You've got the old tannery.
Well, that's included in this
that
plan.
somebody could develop, and it's got a lot of land behind it that could be a public gathering space. So this was one specific location and an idea, but when I talked to them, they're like, well, we're just trying to capture that all these people have said what Tullahoma is really lacking is a central focal point, because we don't have that historic town square or a courthouse. We don't have a central plaza or anything anchoring us. So they said, we want to see the development of a central gathering space, a public space for events.
Isn't that what South Jackson is doing now with the plan that they have around where the farmer's market is, where the outdoor music place is, where the the
All
gathering
of that-
space in the front is?
A lot about the farmer's market and that outdoor amphitheater idea came as we were developing this.
So
That
why
those
is
are
that
fairly new
in
ideas.
here? Like why, I guess what I'm trying to understand is there's so many things when I ask about. It's, oh, well, that's not feasible. We know that we wouldn't be able to do that. Or, oh, that's not feasible. We understand that that's not something that the city would do. So why is that in the city's
This
plan?
one, though, I'm telling you, this is one of the most commented on things. Like, I don't think they could have avoided putting this in the plan because so many people said, we want a central gathering space.
Did
or a
you say-
public gathering space.
You may be new to town, but do you understand that here's the central gathering spot for, here's where we have, here's
But we
this,
had other people saying it should be there. Right. So that's
where
what
an
I'm saying.
existing building
Yeah.
is. But so why would you put that in the plan for the city's plan? If you said earlier to look at this as a strategic plan for the city, why would you put in the strategic plan for the city the ideas of a private developer?
Oh, well, a lot of this is nothing, I mean, think about land use generally. The city doesn't build the city. Private money builds the city.
But talking about specifically tearing down this building to put that amphitheater there.
Yeah, a private person stepped up and said that they are interested in that exact thing.
Okay.
And that's who they're listening to.
It just seems like the focus of, there could be things that are feasible that could be included in the plan.
Do they, if they don't, and I'm sorry, I don't remember, but let's make sure we write that down. I do want to make sure that they have in the plan recognition that a farmer's market and amphitheater type space is planned near South Jackson.
Jennifer, I think a piece
Because I think
that,
you're right, they talk about that a lot, but
I
not
think
the
a
other
piece
ideas.
that's missing from the overall conversation is over the past year and a half, we had meetings like this. We had citizens come in and do the charrettes and draw things. Maureen, I think, was there for many of those things. And as the group moved forward, they prefaced everything with, they tried to capture the ideas and the comments from all of the citizens. And I've used the term vision board before because there are some things in here that we know that may not be feasible. We know that they may not be something that we'll ever be able to afford, but it was an idea from a resident, a citizen, just like you guys are here today. And what we're here to do is to capture ideas and capture amendments. And to me, there's a lot of that in there. This was ideas from the citizens.
And that's why I say I wouldn't put this particular one in the infeasible category,
Right.
because we had people saying it is possible that traders would sell this property. And we had a person saying, I would develop something like that. I have a strong interest in developing that. Just like, we've talked to the property owner of the tannery, and just like we talked, but we had some other ideas, like I've heard a couple times, people have said, Market Square in Knoxville, how they took a city street and closed it and created a square. People have suggested that for Lincoln Street. I would say that might be in the category of more infeasible than these recommendations. And that might be why they didn't put that in, but they did put this one.
But I think the big takeaway is these came from residents just like you guys sitting in here. And the ideas that you guys throw out will get included or not included and talked about the same way that the ideas are in the current one right now. And it was the people who participated.
I have a comment. If this is more of a vision board of our residents and citizens coming together from all these meetings, it seems like the idea of it being a vision board or a wish list of what everyone wants, and the definition of the word plan is what's becoming a big stepping point for a lot of people. So I think a lot of issues that have come from this, which is hearing, oh, this is not feasible, and everything else, comes from the fact that we're saying it is a city plan, but it's also more of a city potential wish list.
I would
least from
agree
us.
with that. In this exercise,
And that's.
earlier, I kind of compared it to strategic planning. And I've participated in strategic planning exercises that are coordinated with budgeting and actual fiscal constraints. And I've participated in strategic planning where we were told, dream big, we'll figure out what things cost and what's feasible later.
Right.
I would put this much more in that category, that their scope of work was not to cap citizens' comments off on what can we afford. We didn't expect citizens to contribute input and have any idea what things cost or whether, we just said, what do you want Tullahoma to look like in
Isn't
the
that
next
the
20 years?
responsibility of the city to then say, here are things that are feasible that could be done, and we're not going to base the city's work on things that are not feasible and that we haven't even looked into? I mean, how much
Yes,
cost
in
would
the
be?
implementation strategy.
So we're gonna pass something and then figure out how
No,
it
we're
works.
not gonna limit people's dreams about what they want their community to be.
I'm not
We're
trying to
gonna-
limit anyone's dreams.
But that's what I'm saying. We ask the community, come out to your local elementary school and help us plan for what you want Tullahoma to look like in the next 20 years. And we didn't say, but base it on how much you're willing to increase your property taxes by. That's what I'm saying. We didn't say that. We just said, tell us what you'd like to see in Tullahoma, and we didn't cap it. But obviously, when you start to talk about implementation, some things are more affordable than other things. Some things are more easily done than other things.
But would this plan not be used to say, but this is what the city has adopted and this is what we're supposed to do? So that justifies the cost that we're going to now put on citizens because we have to, this is what we have to do, so we're gonna make it work.
But it goes back to that the city doesn't do all of it. It goes back to cities get built by private dollars, by private individuals. You know, I'm looking, Joe Denby's right here, a home builder. How much has the city put into helping you build houses?
Not a dime.
That's right. We don't. You stick your neck out and take a risk and have to know the market and make a decision about building here. But what do? When you talk to Mary, she can give you a vision of, hey, that doesn't fit here, or maybe it does, right? That's what our job is to understand kind of the community's idea of what they want so we can communicate it back to those who build it.
And I brought ideas to you guys and you helped me redesign things to how you thought they should look, and we built them like that, and not just all about what I wanted. You know, the city's input was in it as well, and we developed it what the city thought it should look like.
Well, and you brought projects to me, and I told them no. I told you no, I don't think that's a good idea for this location, or I don't think it would work.
Right.
So once again, I'll just say, I think the idea that a lot of people are having is we're calling this a plan. And I feel like if we never called it a plan in the first place, which gives the idea of long-term goals and following towards, sets up legal ideas of, hey, this needs to be followed. Now, if we called it Tullahoma 2040 vision and cut it off there, I think more people would have less worry about it being something that is set in stone and ready to go. Because I agree with a lot of people here, there's a few things that are questionable in this. But if it was a vision, like the vision board that Alderman Berry claims it is, I'd be a little less worried than if it was being called a plan, which seems to be more set in stone.
That is just how I look at it.
But I mean, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm just.
I'm not dubbing that.
You do
anybody else.
additions and
I, as an
renovations.
alderman, look at
You
that,
do
and
all
I can see there's things
Now,
that
cars,
I would vote for, but I don't think we could afford.
I agree with you, this is just what I'm picking up from what you guys are saying and what the community is saying.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And that's me trying to just verbally put in. I'm willing to hear the two people that have been standing in the back with their hands up for too
And I
long.
understand that, but I mean, that's just what a comprehensive plan is there's a certain parameters of what information is and isn't in a comprehensive plan. Again, it's a guiding document, it's not the law, it's something to be consulted when making land use decisions. It has goals, objectives, and vision statement. So that's kind of what, in a nutshell, is the components of a plan. Yes, Ms.
So I have several things that I've been trying to say. The first thing, based on what you were talking about, well, maybe if we just called it a vision plan, I would be okay. So page I, the first page of the executive summary, says the project intent. So I assume that this is what the city hired these people to do. Says the comprehensive development plan will serve as a guiding document for growth and development regarding land use, zoning, utility capacity and construction, economic development, traffic management, recreation, capital budgeting, provision of municipal services and facilities, housing, and community engagement. That is what this plan is supposed to do. And I think it falls short on a lot of those things. So regarding, what does, regarding what your statement is like, well, we just wanted to get everybody's ideas. Well, that's great. I want to build Disneyland downtown, or I want to put a traffic bypass like Shelbyville has. And a lot of people, because I was at like every single meeting, and on the charrette, it went up from at least 2 groups. They were like, we need a bypass. And that, they actually did say in here, there was one comment that there were people who suggested a bypass and it's just not feasible. Well, Disneyland North isn't feasible either. So when you're hiring a professional group of planners, if you suggest that, well, if we just raise taxes enough, we could put that bridge, another bridge over the railroad track. Even though we don't think it's feasible or, recommended, you're really misrepresenting the results of this process to the city of Tullahoma by saying, oh yeah, maybe it's 10 years, 15 years down the road, but yeah, we're thinking about it, if the economics are right or whatever. But that's really misrepresenting what this document says. And I just don't think that that's a fair thing, that you're going to misrepresent the vision, even though, it's got, candy shops and pie in the sky and, the Princess Castle and whatever else. It's like, why would a professional planning group, you're relying on what they say. And from what I heard you say, that you've actually told them, well, we don't think that's, that we want to extend down to South Jackson. They obviously ignored what you had to say. Why would you even give them the time of day? And once all these changes go back, how much more money are we going to have to spend to have them take the red lines and the ampersands out and so on, and incorporate the, any new, hopefully substantial changes into a document that the city of Tullahoma can actually be proud of?
I would ask, you said you had a bunch of things where it thinks it falls short, and what I would like as a board member is to know what those are, where you think that it falls short, and actually tell us and communicate that information to us. Because then we can do, and that's where we have the conversations and we can say, okay, you know what, maybe we did miss this piece and we didn't think about that, so let's take that and let's look and see what we can do. And I think that's why we're here, is so that we can get exactly that kind of feedback, because that helps.
So I spent at least 12 hours critically reading this document, all 111 pages. I didn't go into the appendices. And then another 5 or 6 hours composing 6 pages of single-spaced comments that I then copy and pasted into the SurveyMonkey or whatever that was. And I've also provided this to a few people, to aldermen and so on, And it's like it's just a dead document. You know, nobody so far has paid attention.
I've not received that.
And so,
I've
you know.
not received that. If you would email me that document, I would.
And since then, I've come up with a whole lot more.
It's part of the comments.
Well, what I can say is all the comments that we received on the initial draft of the plan, all those comments verbatim were given to the steering committee and the planning commission. So those were all print.
Pages worth.
Yeah, do you remember that big stack of, yeah, so just so you know, all the additional comments that everybody put into that database that we created for the initial round of comments were sent to the steering committee and to the planning commission for their consideration on revisions.
We didn't have names, so I don't know who's
No.
commenting who's.
I'm just
Well, based on the
comments weren't thrown away or just.
Right, but based on the 4 hours that I actually sat in the planning commission when you were going through that whole document, and then the 4 hours I sat watching it at home for the second, so 8 hours total, there were very few comments that I kept waiting. Oh, she's on this page. Maybe my comment or maybe some general comments will come out. No, it was, oh, this is what's on that page. Oh, great, yeah, and you did spend a ton of time with the, the yellow dots and the TNN and so on.
I pulled that out.
You did. And one of my newer comments is, given the professional nature of the Walker Group, was that a good thing? I don't know. Was that really something that should have happened? I don't know. I'm not a professional planner. Maybe they had a reason that it was in there, and maybe pulling it out wasn't a good thing. But, and so,
no, because then at that point, they had completed their work as the draft plan. Then the draft plans was under the authority of the city and it worked through the steering committee. Once the draft plan was done, the Walker Collaborative was kind of done with their recommendations and their analysis. Then it became the city's plan. So then all those comments were sent to the steering committee and to the planning commission for them to make their changes.
And all the comments from all the citizens were reviewed by the planning commission in total.
Yes, I printed all.
I'm not saying that. Just because you gave it to them, was it considered each comment going to the...
I can't tell you. I can't tell you if the
So you
planning.
don't know, and I don't know if they ever saw anything that we ever wrote.
What I'm saying,
Well, they
let
were
me answer the
provided,
question.
yes.
I provided them, every steering committee member and every planning commission member, I provided them printouts of every comment that the citizens did.
That's right.
Whether or not I can guarantee that the planning commission read all those comments and took those into consideration, I can't guarantee they
But
should
at that
have.
point, the Walker Group's not involved anymore, basically, not involved anymore. And it's a city document at that point.
Right.
Yes.
Every comment by every citizen should have been gone through and checked off. And somebody made sure that that happened.
And then just to clarify, that's still the point that we're at. That's what I heard from the Board of Mayor and Aldermen is
We're still taking-
stop, have more public input meetings.
If those people
We're
had
still
not come
wanting
to that Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting and put their input in as to why they should be held back,
Right.
this document would now be approved and this meeting would not be happening.
That's true.
That's
But that's why we have.
Those people weren't talking about anything that lady wrote, anything that I wrote, or anything that anybody else wrote. They
Right.
were bringing up specific things about the Allen Farm, or whatever it was. And that was used as the basis for tabling this at the time. And we just want to make sure you're concerned about public input now, first meeting of 4. How are we going to make sure that all of the public input that was submitted before during the drafting procedure has been also included
Right.
and seen by everybody that the city is going to make a decision on now, not the Walker Collaborative?
Right.
That's what I'm asking.
Well, it will never be a plan that every person in this room will read it and agree with every point that's in it.
No,
That's
I'm not saying
impossible.
that. I want to make sure that
Right.
all the comments from everybody are
Right.
reviewed. This
Yeah.
is one public meeting, but you have had an opportunity for citizens to put in electronically, physically, whatever they want to do, comments for 6, 9 months already.
Yes.
that the planning commission has had to review.
The comments are actually
But
out on
we
the
do not
website.
know if they have reviewed them individually or not.
Well, and
Just
that's
said,
one of my-
you provide that, but you don't know.
We don't know.
I would,
And that
I would
was-
hope that they had reviewed them.
I hope they have too.
They're also, they're public out there.
I read every line.
At a certain, yeah, I mean, I can't.
And
So I did.
So that's when I went through the page by page, I was like, okay, we're on page 4, anybody have any comments, concerns? Based on the steering committee and the planning commissions doing their homework of reviewing the plan and reviewing all the public comment I had. So that's why at the meeting, page 5, anybody, any questions, concerns? Nothing, no response.
You
And
just
that's
sit
why I
down
think it's a
and read the
benefit.
comment by the persons. Anybody have anything to add to this? Is this something we want to include or exempt from the process going forward?
It's also,
instructions I had
Mary-
given them was saying.
Mary works for that, for these boards, just like I do. So if that is what they ask us to do, we would do it. But again, I don't want Mary to feel like she has to answer that question because this is in the hands of these boards.
No,
If
she
they want
doesn't
us to
have to.
sit and review every comment with them piece by piece, then that's what we would have done, but that isn't what they wanted.
I know that Andy Hall and and I just forgot the name of the gentleman who sits beside me. Andrew Rice. We sat there as we went page by page with the plan and the comments. And as we went through page by page, we went through line by line with you and we were reading the comments, which I know that Andy and I had read ahead of time. So as we sat there, we compared.
Yes, but we weren't reading each comment and saying, do you have any
Yeah, you weren't
thoughts
reading.
on this comment? Do you have any thoughts on this comment?
Because we don't ask you to.
Well, and I had done that in the email when I set up that meeting, I'd given the instructions to the planning commission. Here's the draft plan, here are the comments, please review them in the interest of time and to have a productive meeting. Come with notes of, changes you'd like to see or questions you have or something to keep it going. So no, I was not asked to read each individual comment page by page from all the citizens. There's a certain point where I have to put responsibility on my board and my committees.
one last question.
And yet, the planning commission has approved this document already and is basing recommendations to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen based on this document being something they have approved, but the Board of Mayor and Aldermen have not.
So who holds the planning commission authority? Who does the planning commission, who holds them accountable?
Yeah, I would say Mayor
What do you
Noes.
mean?
I mean, their authority comes from
You can't
state
vote them out of
law,
office.
Right.
but that's why I would say.
So my question is, who holds them?
And the citizens, I guess, through him.
How can the
But Mayor
citizens
Noes
hold?
appoints the members.
But okay. So how are planning commission members, how can they be removed?
The mayor is the only.
I guess it's the discretion of whoever.
Mayor Noes, do you have the authority to remove a planning commission member?
He's the only, TCA, he is the only, he's got to give written notice of why, and there's got to be time to, but they are bound by state law as a commission at that. There's a whole TCA chapter that.
No, I've read
covers-
it.
Okay,
Is there-
just one more, one little thing. So, well, it's a big thing, but it's short.
Your name was, what was your name again?
Maureen Berg.
Maureen Berg, okay.
So I think what happened at the planning commission meeting when they adopted the plan, the citizens did speak up and were not heard and was just dismissed. And that's kind of what got me kind of, much more involved and vocal, was that we just weren't heard. It's like, okay, let's vote to approve it. Well, we just told you some things that we have major concerns about. And so it was just disregarded. So that's kind of what got everything, stirred and kind of the distrust starting, and then, of course, more investigation about what this plan was really about. But the big overall thing I just want to make a comment about is with the plan, I know it's a lot of hard work. I get that. I mean, my profession, I do this kind of thing with with projects, and I know it's hard to keep track of comments and how you do that, and how you address everybody, and how you please everybody. I get that. I think it could have been done better, maybe line by line, and have a disposition. In fact, I plan to submit my comments that way so that I get a disposition with them. But the bigger thing is, you know, we've been told this is our plan, and when you read through it, when I read through it now, I go, gosh, it just doesn't feel like my plan. I mean, my plan is a Tullahoma resident, not my personal plan. It feels like it's a plan for outside corporations and developers to come into our town. And of course, when we see those high density areas and we see other, you know, outside developers coming in, it's kind of scary because we think, what's going to happen to this town? So that's just the big overall kind of concern that
You have a question for, just from that statement there. You say you don't want big corporations to come into town. So are you also against like new marshals coming in?
I don't really care for marshals, honestly. I know. I'd rather see small. I'd rather see small local businesses flourish.
Okay, no, I agree with that.
But no. What I mean by that is, of course, you're going to have outsiders come in, but it's just that high density stuff that is not part of the town now, and it would make it look very different than what it is now. That's what I'm getting at.
Well, I think speaking for myself, I think I'm getting that message loud and clear that there's definitely concern with the traditional neighborhood mixed-use projects. But understand when the plan was drafted, that concern hadn't been brought up. The consultants were just working, and I'm making excuses, but the consultants were just working on the data they had at that time.
Well,
And then there was a there was an interest voiced of having mixed-use projects in Tullahoma. So there's portions of the population that are interested in having those developments.
Well, I think also what's been helpful hearing from you all is the way, and I mean you all from July 25th meeting through today, not just this tonight, but as much as you can, and you said you're going to note page numbers. I do think if there are things that are poorly worded in here, or things that, I know a couple things have been pointed out to me where I'm like, oh yeah, that's not what we intended. That does sound different than how we talked about it with the consultants. Those do need to change. And I'm really appreciative of that. It does need to sound like Tullahoma's plan. I'm really proud of our community. And this, I'm just going to say it because it's my opinion, but a lot of communities, we would not have had this kind of input. And even up to this point, when we were seeing 800, 900, 1,000, I think ultimately 1,200 people took the survey to give input to this. Like I said, over 100 people coming out at the elementary schools. You know, I worked in a larger community for 3 years. I worked in Murfreesboro for 3 years. I can only remember one public input meeting where 100 people showed up. And they're 160,000 person community. So I mean, it just tells you the level of engagement and how much people care about Tullahoma. And I agree with you. I don't care if this plan doesn't get adopted for another year, if it takes that amount of time to make sure that this is Tullahoma's plan. Because we have had to suffer with an outdated, what I think is a terrible plan on the books right now. So to get to a great plan, we are here to work with you all and take whatever time it takes to get there. So I appreciate you guys so much for being here and for continuing to put your comments in writing, to keep working with us. Thank you.
Can the answers to questions 9 and 10 be included in the appendix? It's public comments. I mean, it was the free form, I think. What do you like about Tullahoma? What do you want to see about Tullahoma? Yeah, it's questions 9 and 10.
Okay.
And I believe it's in appendix A.
Okay. Free form answers. Okay.
Real quick, Mary, when we're talking about high density, and it scares me too, guys, but we can't just pull that out completely, right? It's state law requires us to address high density in some aspect in these plans.
Yes, you cannot, it's a violation of Fair Housing Act. You can't just have a plan where the only residential option in the entire city is single-family residential. You have to provide for some.
And it specifically
Mixed
says
uses.
high density in,
Yeah.
in state law.
Yeah, it's fair housing. You have to provide for a variety of housing types.
Right, but some of those areas
How much is
identified,
up to you.
but Mary, some of those areas identified would be where it's existing,
Right.
correct?
Right, correct.
So we're gonna meet that, because we
Right.
have all of those things
Right.
existing.
Just an offhand comment, I wonder how many people out of all the meetings, and all the planning sessions, have been from low-income housing and public housing that have attended those meetings. I wonder. I know of one, my brother-in-law came to one for once.
They've been
I
invited.
can't say, I don't know.
Their input,
Yeah.
the low-income public housing folks, I don't see them at any of the meetings.
Well, I can't tell who's low-income or public housing just by looking at them. I can say that
But
the,
you do have their addresses,
I
right?
can say, not necessarily.
I don't know if we asked
I
their
can
addresses
say
on
that
this
the
list.
housing authority was part of the steering committee.
One person or the whole, the
The
director?
representative from the housing authority was part of the steering committee. And I can say that we tried to provide outreach to all residents of the city,
The point is,
okay?
you may have a representative of them.
Yeah.
And that's nice and that's good.
Okay.
But aren't they citizens, and wouldn't you
Of course.
expect their potential percentage of the population to show up at meetings? I'm just saying,
It's hard to say,
if
yeah.
you want it for all the people, we gotta make sure all the people are involved.
I mean, I can
Well, you
say
can't
that one
force
of,
involvement
I can say that in the survey, we did ask, what is your annual household income range? And it's listed here on page 23 of the appendices.
Who
So
developed
we
the
did-
survey?
We
consult-
approved it with the consultants, yeah.
Right, the consultants developed the survey and they ran it through the steering committee with the questions that was asked.
But do you understand though, like I completed the survey and, you know, the first question, or one of the questions is, what do you think rank the following items for the highest, the most important issues for Tullahoma? And then the 7 issues that are listed are mobility for non-motorized citizens, mobility for motorized, well, it doesn't have the end of the question. Parks and recreation, downtown revitalization, education, housing conditions, economic. Do you know how broad those are? So maybe I picked housing, I don't remember. Maybe I picked housing conditions as my top thing, but maybe mine is, hey, let's slow the roll and let's make sure that we know growth is coming, but we don't have to have, to have neighborhoods that look like the cheaper alternative. We can do, so, you know, that might be my housing conditions, but Bob might have something completely different in mind when he chooses housing conditions. And then to say, well, housing conditions is the number one, you know, it's number 2 on the survey. So that's why we have to incentivize outside developers to come to Tullahoma. So, you know, it's just a point that I'd like to make, that you can't take one broad category and then use the survey to defend the actions of this is, you know, because you can use the survey for how you want when you've got broad categories, because people's housing concerns might be on the opposite ends of the spectrum.
And I do think that's why that was just one element. We had focus groups, the steering committee, and all of the public input meetings at the schools, like out in the communities. So the survey results definitely are one component, and it was, to your point, we tried to do a variety of things so that we could try to reach the broadest audience as possible. You know, I think we even talked about social media or like
Yeah, we did
other.
social media, I did radio, news,
But I
mail
also-
it everybody, I did a podcast, I did flyers out in all the neighborhood, like Dameron's, a local
I will
lighthouse
say though
nursery, I put
that
flyers
if
up everywhere.
you remember the original team, when they originally proposed to us, and Mayor, you'll remember this, they had a public relations firm
Oh, yeah.
listed, and it added quite a
30
bit to the
grand.
cost of this
Yeah, it was
plan.
like-
And we
what
said,
was it,
I
30
think
grand?
that while we might not be traffic engineers and we might not be, you know, the renowned planner that Phil Walker is or whatever, we think we can handle local PR and marketing of this plan and do our own meetings. And so we tried to save money on the plan that way and cut that out. And I do really feel like out of everything we've done in the plan, I think we reached a lot of people. I mean, I think sending the postcards to every household, holding the meeting.
Yeah.
For the plan. Holding meetings out in the neighborhoods, one in each elementary school, as opposed to only one at City Hall or something like that. We really tried to do things that we thought would make it accessible to more people to participate.
Last comment about the survey, because when you look at the responses, and I know that a percentage was used earlier in this, saying that 40% wanted a master plan community or something like that. But when it's, you have 7 options and you get to rank them, then when you add up your responses, 51% single family house, you know, you add up the percentages and it's well over 100. So you can't say 40%.
I wonder if that was that one that you were allowed to pick more than one?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it had to be because.
Had to be, yeah.
Yeah.
The percentages don't add up to 100, it adds up to 200. And I mean, yeah, so.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, can everybody come back for the next one? The next one is.
I won't be here
I mean, I think
Saturday,
that
but I'll be back next.
yeah, I mean, I think that and Jennifer, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the reason why we have so many open houses is try to capture available time for as many people as possible.
No, I appreciate that.
Not
And
necessarily a
please help
continuation
us,
of the
I
same
say
route,
this,
so.
I feel like I try to spread the word about this as much as possible. Communicate these changes to us in whatever way is best for you. You know, I think it's awesome for you to take the time and type them out and have the page numbers. That certainly makes it easier for us to review and understand what you're pointing at. But also, if you're more comfortable, you know, you have neighbors and friends that aren't here, if they're not comfortable coming to this meeting, email us, call us, stop by and see Mary at her office during the week. This is not the only opportunity. Just like I try to say, speaking at public comments or public hearings, those are not the only opportunities. Your elected officials, Daniel, Mayor Noes is here, they're, Kirk Lake, sorry, you'll find out soon, Kirk, are available 24/7 really. I mean, they make their emails and their phone numbers known and are available to you all. So whatever way people want to communicate concerns to us, we're open to that. You don't have to just come to this meeting to be heard.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much.